District 37, Carney, Gibbon, and Shelton.
Good afternoon, Senator Carol Blood, representing District 3, which is part of Bellevue and Papillion, Nebraska.
Thank you. The committee legal counsel to my right is Elsa Knight, and the committee clerk to my far right is Raquel Dean. Today and before all hearings and all bills to be heard will be posted on the wall outside the hearing room. The senator introducing the proposed legislation will present first. Senators who serve on the committee are encouraged to ask questions for clarification. That said, the presenter and those testifying are not allowed to directly question senators serving on the committee. For purposes of accuracy, we ask each presenter to state one's name, spell it, and state who you represent, if not yourself. If you're planning to testify, please fill out the testifier sheets that are found in the binders on the tables in the back of the room. Be sure to print clearly and fill them out completely. When it is your turn to testify, give the testifier sheet to the committee clerk or the page. If you do not wish to testify but would like to indicate your position on an interim study, please complete the sign-in sheets with the number of the interim. These can be found on the binders on the back tables. This sheet will be included as an exhibit in the official record. In your Urban Affairs Committee, will use the light system to promote maximum engagement to those wishing to express their positions on proposed legislation before us or interim studies. The light system will generally be 5 minutes with the green light, for 1 minute with the yellow light. With the red light, you're asked to conclude. The 3-minute light system may change. I think based on our attendance today, we'll go with the 3-minute light system. For testifiers, we will encourage opponents, proponents, and neutral testifiers to come forward as the line gets shorter, just start moving up. We will also acknowledge letters received from all concerned parties. Should you have handouts you wish to share, please share at least 10 copies to our clerk to make copies. If you don't have 10 copies, the clerk will then distribute any handouts to all committees. Senators, following all proponent, opponent, and neutral testimony, the bill presenter is offered the opportunity to close on their final remarks. As a committee, we work diligently to give fair and full hearing. We will make every effort to accommodate any special request of assistance. At this hearing, we ask you to be respectful of the process and to one another. And lastly, please silence or turn off your cell phones. And thank you. And with that, I ask Senator Armendariz to come forward for LR 441. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman McKinney and members of the Urban Affairs Committee. I am Senator Christy Armendariz, and I represent District 18, CHRISTY ARMENDARIZ. Today, I'm here to introduce LR 441. Nebraska has been experiencing a severe shortage of housing options for its residents across the state at all income levels. As a result of this shortage, residents of Nebraska are faced with significantly increased rents and home prices. I serve on the Nebraska Legislature's Appropriations Committee, and over the past 2 sessions, there have been several proposals to appropriate funds to various housing grant programs that have been established in our state. Despite the legislature's appropriating significant funding for a variety of housing grants, money alone is not going to solve the problem. We can appropriate money to build housing, but if regulatory burdens such as zoning requirements, time constraints for permitting, and compliance costs are not addressed, we are only limiting the ability to get much needed housing built. That's why I'm bringing this LR. In recent years, states across the country have explored and passed legislation addressing the regulatory matters deemed necessary to help increase housing affordability and supply. And I think it's time for Nebraska to follow suit. Over the 2024 interim, a coalition of interested parties have been having conversations about the state's landscape and obstacles that are impacting the ability to get housing built. These conversations pertain to housing at all income levels and for a variety of housing types. Those here to testify today will provide information as to the current landscape in Nebraska in terms of cost and supply legislation passed in other states and prioritizing housing supply density instead of focusing mainly on single-family homes and the needs specific to certain populations. I appreciate the discussion today. My hope is at the end of this hearing, we have ideas to bring forward for potential housing solutions in 2025.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any proponents?
Chairman McKinney, members of the Urban Affairs Committee, my name's Laura Ebke, Lauraebke. I'm the Senior Policy Fellow, and I'm here today representing the Platt Institute. I'm passing around a copy of my testimony in case I don't get it all done in 3 minutes. First, I want to talk a little bit about the current housing solutions and express some appreciation for the legislature for the work that you've done in the past. Nebraska has a housing shortage affecting people of all stages of life and at a variety of income levels across the state. Recent legislative sessions have seen the introduction of several proposals to address Nebraska's housing shortage. Many of the proposals have called for increased appropriations to the middle income and workforce housing funds. In 2020, the legislature passed LB 866, the Municipal Density and Missing Middle Housing Act, requiring cities with populations over 20,000 as well as to create housing plans to improve housing availability and affordability, as well as establish goals for land use regulations. And the Platt Institute supported that legislation. Like many industries, overburdensome regulations become barriers. In Nebraska, many local regulations are contributing to the lack of housing supply by restricting the types of housing that can be built and adding to construction time and costs. This lack of housing is impacting the ability of communities across our state to attract and retain workers, graduates, and retirees. There is a significant burden of excessive regulation and we have some proposed solutions. Since 2019, scholars at our think tank partner, the Mercatus Center, have researched how land use policy reforms can improve the problem of housing supply and affordability. Among the things that they've suggested are allowing for duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes on lots currently zoned for single-family homes, permitting the construction of accessory dwelling units, reducing lot size requirements. Since 2021, the Mercatus Center has annually published policy briefs noting key legislative progress in the states and providing a menu of reform ideas for states to consider. In their August 2024 brief, they noted that 2 of our neighbors passed key reforms. Iowa preempted local aesthetic requirements for exterior siding that is more restrictive than the state building code. And Colorado passed 5 land use laws, including a bill requiring cities to allow more multifamily housing near rail stations and major bus corridors. In the same brief, and I'm not going to go into detail, but in the same brief, they proposed 17 state reform ideas, and I think that was sent to you yesterday via email, so I'm not going to go into detail there. One other thing that I'd like you to consider is workforce considerations. We all know that there is significant workforce shortage in our trades that would be involved in building. Something that you oftentimes won't hear me say anything about is encouraging you to look at state licensing of things like HVAC. Currently, HVAC and plumbing are local licenses. That makes it very difficult, especially for people who are on the edge in a county, to be able to cross county lines and get a second or a third license. So I do think that it makes some sense to move ahead to a statewide licensure of those kinds of trades.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Senator Blood?
Thank you, Chair. How are you today, Ms. Ebke?
I'm just fine, thank you.
A couple quick questions. So zoning, that's a local issue, right?
It is.
Okay, so I'm a little confused about why we're bringing zoning to the state. I know Omaha recently changed some of their zoning and they're allowing multiple families on one piece of property. I can't remember what they call it, but I remember that they did that. And then are we talking about creating another Nebraska office when the governor's trying to like cut down everything to do licensing here in Nebraska as opposed to the municipalities? Is that what you're talking about?
So when we talk about workforce, and I testified before this committee a couple of years ago during an interim study when we were talking about HVAC and plumbing. And one of the things that we noticed, we've had several people contact us about it, is people especially in Sarpy and Douglas counties, you know, those areas, they have most of their business in Douglas County, get their licensing in Douglas County, but then they have to go and get a second license if they have one or two clients in Sarpy County. And so just as we have statewide licensure for electricians, it might make sense to combine some of those things into a statewide license so that people can do have the option of crossing county lines and practicing their trades more expansively.
Do we know what kind of fiscal impact that would have on the municipalities?
On the municipalities, no, I have no idea. But I think it's something to, you know, again, like the electricians have done it for years. So I mean,
Yeah, I'm mostly just trying to get answers.
Yeah,
so
I don't know.
not judging.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Senator Lowe?
Thank you. So what you're saying is if a county line is down the middle of a street somewhere,
Mhm.
and I see my neighbor over here using Joe's Plumbing
Right.
to fix his air conditioner, I try to hire him, but he can't work for me.
Unless he's got a license in that county. Yeah, and therein lies the problem, especially in the larger municipalities, the Omaha, Sarpy, those areas, because it's hard to tell where the county breaks, you know, sometimes. So I think it makes sense. You know, in my community, I live in Crete. It makes sense. I had a person in a plumber. We had a hot water heater went out a couple of years ago, and I called the person who built our house and who was the plumber when we built our house. And I said, you know, can you come and put our water heater in? He says, no, Crete won't let us do that because we don't have this level of plumber. You know, they said they could come and put new piping in my kitchen, but they couldn't put a new water heater in. So, I mean, I think that there are things like that we need to look at to make it more slick for people to practice their trade.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other proponents?
Good afternoon, Chairman McKinney, members of the committee. My name is David Young, David Young. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for NIFA, Nebraska Investment Finance Authority. I'm pleased to be here to speak to you today. We're going to talk about what the volume of the housing shortage really looks like in the state and propose a couple things to think about. The state currently has 850,000 housing units across the whole state. The average age is 66 years old or built before 1958. Since 2008, we have been building about 3,000 houses, 3,500 housing units a year. Prior to 2008, we were building 8,000. The national average tells us that about 1% of our housing stock, or 8,000 units, will go out of service every year due to age, dilapidation, fire, those kinds of things. Another way to look at it is at the rate we're building, we are losing 5,000 houses a year. In addition to the 5,000 units that we are losing every year due to dilapidation, the census says we're going to grow about 8,000 houses per year between now and 2028. So that puts us at a significant disadvantage across the state, which is causing our prices to go up. Right, we see that. When you look at the numbers around pricing specifically, the median sale price in the state for an existing home, again, average age 1958, is $285,000, while a new home costs $424,000 on average. I'm I'm going to go back and build on what the Platt Institute was talking around zoning. So the regulatory complex in our state is complex. There's good reasons behind that. 80 counties in the state have published zoning codes. 9 counties have no zoning codes, and 4 counties have zoning codes that are only available to view in person. The top 30 cities by population also have their own zoning codes. Or another way to look at this is there are more than 119 zoning codes across our state. So if you are a builder or a developer and you would like to get your house built in another community, you need to go and figure that out. 119 different ways. The building codes are similar in number and in diversity across our state. We are 80 to 100,000 units behind right now. That is the demand across our state. You're going to hear a lot of people discuss different ideas. I think it is our position that we need an all of the above approach when we're looking at this problem. To build 80,000 units or 100,000 units over the next decade will be significant. It's a significant economic opportunity for our state. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Senator Blunt?
Thank you. I'm sorry, but I have a problem with the zoning thing here, so
Oh, yeah,
I'm
sure.
I completely support what we're trying to do here, but having come from a municipal background, I know why we have zoning. And so to say that zoning is preventing us from doing this, I question it. So for example, you're pretty familiar with Sarpy County. So you know there's an area that we can't build past a certain height because of what? Offutt Air Force Base.
Sure.
Right? Each community, including Lincoln, including Omaha, they set these standards to protect our neighborhoods. The size, the design, and the quantity of houses they can have in space, health and wellness, right? We don't want houses next to a sewer plant, even though Omaha does, but you know what I mean. We want to be smart about it. Sometimes protecting the environment. We know that when we have zoning, that we also have public meetings, so the public's part of it. And I think that that's an important role. And yes, that would slow the process down. But you know the not in my backyard story, right?
I do.
I live in one of those neighborhoods. And I think that municipalities should have a say in this, and that a one-size-fits-all policy. I mean, what would be good for North Platte would not necessarily be good for Bellevue. What would be good for Omaha would not necessarily be good for Juniata, Nebraska. I hear what you're saying, and I think they have this ability, and I don't know if the state needs to be a nanny government and tell municipalities to lighten up on their zoning. And that's the concern that I have, is that, and I know we're gonna hear from both sides. I don't want to slow down allowing people to build, but I also know there's a lot of hardworking people at municipal levels whose job is to help you push it through more quickly. Now, I also know some people are better at their jobs than other people. So I saw your face. I know that as well. But I want to be cautious, is that zoning is there for a reason. I don't think we need to have government overreach, but I also don't think we need a nanny government telling municipalities. I mean, we already totally screwed them over in the last legislative session. So they're going to be really having trouble financially already. I think most of them would be open to changing zoning. I know I've helped people have their zoning changed in Bellevue before, turning the zoning into something different so they can put a business in a residential area. So I know it can be done, and it's not that hard. So maybe, I don't know who you're working with, but.
I'm working with you, Senator.
All right. But all I ask is that I know we have a lot of issues here that we're going to discuss, but I do have, it's a red flag for me when we start talking about telling municipalities how to zone. I think that it's one of the few freedoms they have outside of being a Dillon's rural state. And we tell them how to do everything else, but we give them a certain amount of levity when it comes to zoning. And again, we just saw that in Omaha. Like I answer these questions all the time, being a person who runs for office, and I always say zoning has got to be part of this picture. So I agree with you, but I don't know if a one-size-fits-all policy is the way to do it.
So if I can repeat back to you what I think you're saying to me,
Sure.
is that
What an effective listener you are. Good job. Right.
Local control is important,
It is.
right? A one-size-fits-all approach may not be appropriate for the whole state. I agree with you. Where I might respectfully push back a little bit, changing zoning codes is very expensive, time-consuming.
I agree.
And when you have 119 of them, there are some areas that we could create a consistency and a model code that state, cities, and counties could adopt by choice, which would allow developers to cross the state and build in their area.
But giving them that option, not
Oh, an
forcing
option,
them,
of course, right?
not a mandate.
20 years working for municipalities, right? There's a lot of good reasons, right, behind why zoning codes exist.
I think that's very fair.
Yeah.
Right.
But it is a challenge, right, to ask Dawson County to rewrite their zoning code from the ground up, right? Versus provide them with some guidance about here are some clauses you could include that would modernize your code.
But to be honest, a lot of those zoning codes already have the ability to do some of what we're talking about. It's just them voting in favor of that, right? Having the town meeting, having the city council vote for it. Planning committee brings it to the city council or whatever the board is in a smaller town.
What I
Is
have
that
found
not the
over
process?
with respect, what I have found over the last number of years is that some counties, some cities have the ability to do a PUD, planned unit overlay,
Right.
right? Which would say for this one area, I'm going to allow smaller houses, smaller lots, higher density. And those codes are pretty flexible. Developer comes in and says, hey, I need to do this. Not all counties have that. Right, and to go into a county or a city that does not have that and say your minimum lot size is 85 by 130, but the new standard is 45. Right, how do you ask them to change their entire code?
Like you just did. I find it really hard to believe that most municipalities would not be open to that. We'll have Lynn Rex talk about it when she's up here, but
Fair, yeah. And
I
Lynn's a
just,
good friend of mine, so yes.
yeah, I find it hard to believe that they won't be open to it if it would bring more housing to them.
Well, I think that's the question, right? Can we make sure that they all have that ability to do that and then have language that they can plug into their code to say, we allow PUDs, we allow overlays, right, and move forward. That's all I'm proposing.
Again, I think that's very fair. I just don't want to big brother them after we screw them over. I don't want to say we because I was on one of them in the last election. I mean, in the last legislative session. So they're struggling right now. We don't need to have them struggle anymore.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Senator Lowe?
Thank you. At one time I heard a number of the number of houses that were short in Nebraska. It was quite a large number. Do you know how many houses we are short now?
80 to 100,000 is the current range, and we are losing about 5,000 to 10,000 a year in gap when you take growth and delete depreciation.
How do our cities grow if we are short of housing?
Which is why I propose an all of the above approach. We need to take a look at allowing reciprocity for plumbers and electricians trades, right, across county lines. So if you're registered in Sarpy County, you can also work in Lincoln County. I think we should also look at PUD standardizing across the state where developers can come in and they can say, hey, this meets the model code. Would you like to adopt it? Right? Then we can build 100 units, 200 units at a time. This has been done before. Prior to the housing crash in 2008, we were building 8,000, 9,000 units a year. After that, a lot of people got out of the business. So we need to look at our regulations now to streamline it to allow people to get back into business, is my argument, Senator.
At one time, when the cities were short of housing, they had mobile home parks.
Mhm.
It was a fast way to put lots of people in an area and allowed them off-street parking, basically. Why don't we see more mobile home parks now?
I don't know that, I'm not an urban planner, right? I do know that there are restrictions in the zoning codes for mobile home parks. I also know in places that do not restrict mobile home parks, financing on them is sometimes difficult. You still need to put in the infrastructure. In some communities, it's not a zoning problem or a willingness problem, it's an infrastructure problem, right? When we have met with some of those communities to say, if we want to put another 500 units in, we need to upgrade the water system, right? And they have, there are programs at the state to do that, but 5, 7, 10 years, right, before you can get on the list to do that loan. We're looking at ways to approach communities to help them do those loans in an expedited fashion. I think we just have an all of the above challenge that we need to look at. I mean, really understanding that it's 80 to 100,000 now, and every year 5 to 10,000 units short with our growth. Understanding that gives us a scale. And then when we think about the senator's proposal, right, what are we going to do here? You know, do we look at some of these other areas that have eliminated single-family zoning? Do we look at consistent zoning or creating model codes that cities and counties can choose to adopt by their own choice, but it gives them the option? Reciprocity in building permit, building trades, I think is huge.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was wondering, when we think about like the housing supply and the lack thereof, do you think it's also an issue of not being innovative enough as a state? Because I see in other places, people are looking at 3D homes, prefab homes, modular home developments and things like that. Are we not thinking outside the box enough? Because you see, you clearly stated in the past, we were producing more homes, and then you look in the past further, in the 70s and 80s, we were producing a lot more homes with, I would say, less technology than we do today. So is it just a lack of like being open to innovation as well?
I will argue that my understanding of the history, right? You had the baby boomers coming back from World War II, and the reason why the largest percentage of our population were built in the 1950s was in response to that. Also during that time, cities financed the infrastructure themselves. They put in the roads, they put in the water lines, they put in the sewer lines. Fast forward to the 1970s, 1980s, Lynn Rex will talk about this, we created TIF to finance that. It's a good tool, right? But that's the only tool currently right now available to put the infrastructure in. Density is the answer if you want to build high volume, right? 4plexes, 16plexes. There's a technical term, it's called the missing middle housing, right? A lot of zoning codes don't allow that today. In the larger communities, Senator, yes, they have those in their zoning codes, but they don't allow them in others. And so how do we do that? I do think that modular is the answer. We have 2 modular manufacturers here in the state. They sell all their houses in Colorado because they get more money for them. We're not the only state facing this housing shortage. Actually, I think the numbers nationally argue between 2 million and 4 million houses are short across the nation. So by comparison, our challenge is small, but it's our challenge. And I think that we should focus on that and look at all aspects of it.
So if we have 2 modular home developers in the state and all their homes are being sold outside the state, what are we doing wrong?
I don't know that it's what we're doing wrong, right? In Colorado, which is where a large percentage of these houses go, they can pay more for the house. They have a shorter building window, time of year that they're allowed to build, and they have a higher density of population, so they can pay more. So a modular house that would sell here for $300,000 is selling there for $400,000 plus. So it's a simple supply and demand. Where would you sell your home, right? If you're a manufacturer. NIFA has been working, and on our website, if you go to NIFA.org housing framework, we have different pillars. We have a pillar specifically that's looking at modular homes and creating a regional buying pool so that we can buy a couple of homes at scale and have communities come in and say, I want 5, and do that across the state, which would give certainty to those plans. We are looking at that as well.
Yeah, because I asked that question because I always hear that housing is the #1 crisis in the state, but I don't see a lot of movement on addressing the housing issue. So I'm just wondering, like, is there any type of like incentives or anything to like persuade those developers to start selling those homes in the state at more of a volume so we can compete with Colorado?
My argument, again, and the senator and I were kind of alluding to it, if you have a model code that communities could choose to adopt, and then developers could come in and go, I know I can build my development, I can rinse and repeat it across the state, that will drive barriers down significantly. But it needs to be a choice specifically, and communities need to have their input, right? There's a lot of reasons around that. I also think reciprocity in the building trades, right? If you're licensed in one place, you're licensed across the state. I think more importantly, when you look at some of the standards in the building code that other people are going to talk about, we can make consistency across there, right? If water lines are approved to be PEX here, they should be approved to be PEX across the state. Those kinds of things. And that's a very detailed answer because this is a hard problem. I think the challenge we've got is how do we get consistently good at building houses again? How do we rebuild that portion of our economy?
Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for bringing this up and having this conversation.
No problem. Other proponents?
Afternoon, Chairman McKinney and members of the Urban Affairs Committee. My name is Jason Thielen, Jason Thiellen, and I'm the president of Welcome Home, which is a non-for-profit. Been in front of this board a few times. We focus on non-taxpayer solutions to start home construction, and an area that we've been really focused on is partnering with our elected officials, doing some education, looking at the regulatory environment, which has been some good discussion with David there earlier. I want to thank Senator Armendariz for introducing this interim study. We're excited to see it go forward and appreciate her interest in the issue. I think we can all agree that housing is a significant issue and we lack tens of thousands of available units. Sounds like 100,000. Losing as well as not picking up as we could. So it impacts everybody, low income, middle income, first time home buyers, those that are looking, empty nesters looking to step down. Citizens across the board trying to get that first rung or get out of that large house and onto something that's a little more affordable for them. In addressing this housing shortage, we prevent some unnecessary regulatory items. I've spoke about it before. As things come up, the additional, so we keep adding on to the building code in particular is what I'm gonna focus on. They get adopted and implemented, but nobody ever looks at them. And I think we really need to think about reassessing what those codes look like. Not telling people what to do, but actually taking a look and doing a cost benefit analysis of that what's on the books. And then as things come up that maybe don't add the benefit and just cost, we need to have the courage politically to get rid of some of those regulatory items and make it easier for us to build housing. Brought a couple books here. I'm not an expert on this. This is the International Residential Code. I'm just getting into it. From 2000, it gives you an idea of how thick that is. And today's 221 is that, almost double the size. Talking with our builder partners, this is maybe one of the single biggest reasons why we can't build homes affordably. Continue to add additional regulatory items on the books every single year. I've been in here, I've watched it happen, and it continues to drive the costs up, and I would argue I'm not entirely sure what the benefits are. Recently, the study's been up forward, both the National Home Builders and Welcome Home commissioned a study with UNO that showed that the government, pretty much the regulatory items add somewhere between 23 to 33% to the total cost of a home. That is one of the single biggest issues I think we can look at. I think that hopefully this study looks at. I think that when you're looking for some solutions that are based not in more funding, but in something that maybe we can roll some things back and see and watch the market respond to it. So it is something that we are here to help and want to be a part of. We appreciate your interest in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Senator Blunt.
Since Gavin's here, I thought I'd better ask a lot of questions. Anybody who's been to Urban Affairs knows what I'm talking about. So why do you think that they have regulatory codes?
Why do I think they have regulatory
I
codes?
mean, sincerely.
Sincerely, well, I mean, obviously, every private industry needs some rails, right?
So for the protection of the consumer.
For sure, but it seems to be an increasing, I would call it a part of an argument or a comment that is designed to me to keep the discussion I'm having. It's always life safety. It's life safety. It's life safety. The tornado came through in Elkhorn just 5 months ago or 3 months ago or whatever. How many people died in their homes in Nebraska? Do you know? Zero. Correct. If those houses have been built in the late 1800s, I'd argue a lot of people probably die. I think it's a warning system, some of that stuff, but the construction of our homes today are very good and have been, I would argue, since probably the 70s and 80s.
So one of the reasons that that's the case is because of regulation.
For sure.
And so what I find is a lot of the regulations that we have come from the trades, come from the people that do the plumbing, that do the electricity.
And the manufacturers and the producers of those products, correct?
So again, I just want to make sure that whatever we do, I'm not disagreeing with anything you guys are bringing to the table, but I also have to make sure that, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
I don't think anybody on the side of trying to solve this problem wants to throw the baby out of the bathwater. I think we have to have hard discussions, and I think we have to quit hiding behind some certain truths on both sides that are designed to stop this conversation from really being productive. And one of them is we got to have regulations. I agree we do, but do we think we can look at our regulatory items that have been on the books for a long time? We have no idea whether they're actually accomplishing what they're supposed to accomplish or not.
I think there's people in our bigger municipalities that could answer that question.
I bet they can't.
So some of what I'm hearing though, and you're bringing it to us, are conversations that I still feel should be held with the municipalities, with the city councils, with the mayors, with the county boards.
And I agree with you, Senator Blood.
You guys had those conversations?
100%. I've had a couple regulatory items in front of staff for a couple of years now that have not been approved, and they're simple ones.
In front of staff, but not in front of the council.
Well, I can't take it in front of the council. Oftentimes, the private industry cannot come forward and ask for a regulatory change and submit that without going through staff. I can't just come up with my own regulatory items and go to you on the city council of Bellevue and say, hey, I want these changed, without you running through staff and have
Actually,
them
you
look at it.
can ask for to do, there's public comment you can get on the agenda in almost all municipalities. So you actually could do that.
Not everybody has that comment section. I have to be put on the agenda, which means my agenda item has to be approved by the council.
Right, like not by the council, but usually by like the city administrator.
Correct, if you can get it there. And then they would ask, well, have you talked to staff? I've been down the road. As you know, I work
No,
on
I
the
know,
planning
I'm not-
zoning side. That's what I
I
do
just-
for a living. So
I'm big on taking it to the level of government that it belongs. And I just am really worried because people have been coming to us for years, asking us to basically be a nanny government. And I'm not comfortable with that. I think we're gonna have to figure out what the middle ground is to make sure that we can.
I
move
don't
forward.
want a nanny government. I want less government. But unfortunately, in the environment where we're at, in order for me to get local governments to do things, what is my hammer? What is my ability to make them make changes?
I think I'd be calling the media. That's just me.
Well, that's one way to do it.
Public attention.
It creates an adversarial relationship though, right? Of relationships that I've had for 20 plus years. To me, that's not also a productive way of going about it. We have to be able to come to the table and have these conversations and it's not the state trying to be the nanny government. It's not the regulatory items holding on to their power and their control. We have to come to, it has to be a total public-private solution. And so the only way to do that is to talk about some of these things in an environment where there can be some productive conversations, some realization that maybe we don't need the next thing on our, whatever you want to call it in the house, right?
So how will this interim study get back to the political subdivisions?
Well, I think how will, answer that question again?
So from what you just said, if I
Yep.
heard you correctly, how will this information that we're talking about during this interim study in the state capitol be filtered back to our political subdivisions? Because that's supposedly the goal.
Well, it's much like the studies that we were working on. What I'm finding now, trying to have some discussions with local elected officials as well as staff, is there is no real tangible data that I can say to you, I know for a fact this part of the code is not yielding the benefit of which it was intended. And if we removed it, there's a savings of X. We have no idea what that looks like. Same thing with zoning or subdivision regs, right? Some of the subdivision regs on the books are from the 70s and 80s. To your point, we are far behind most states on the development and outside of things.
Wouldn't that just involve like a feasibility assessment?
I think it's more than that. It's an in-depth study. I don't know what that looks like totally yet. We're working on it, but it's an in-depth study of some cost benefits that you can show. You have to be able to prove it, obviously. Density, types of housing, different types of housing. What do we call a regulatory lot versus not? All these things are items that if the public and private group could come together and actually have some forum at the local level, I think you wouldn't have people here at the state asking for you to step in and say, we got to start having some of these conversations.
Thank you. I have a couple questions.
Mhm.
So you mentioned that first book was in 2000, right?
That's correct.
What kind of phone did you have in 2000?
Kind of phone did I have in 2000?
Yeah.
Not a cell phone, if that's what you're asking. It's probably still a house phone,
What kind of phone you have now?
not iPhone.
Do you think your life is better with your iPhone?
Absolutely not. I do not. Do you? I would throw my phone away tomorrow if I didn't need it. If I didn't have to have it. No, I think it's actually, I would argue the phone is the worst thing that's probably happened in society.
It's because you're a busy man, though, right?
Could be possible, but I also got kids and I see what it does to them.
Yeah.
And I see what it does to adults who can't hold attention, and we can't solve some of these problems, right? And technology has taken over our workforce. They think everybody wants to be a tech person and no one wants to swing a hammer. That's part of our problem too.
But do you think like the changes in the codes over the past 20 plus years were intended for the benefit of our society?
I think some of them are, and this is not my area of expertise. Mine's land use and zoning and development, but I'm learning because I've spending time with my builders. They would tell you there are things in between these two books that are good, that are needed. There is a lot in here that is driven by manufacturers, unions, and people with their own interest to get their product on the books. Some of the energy stuff, some of that stuff is probably good. There is a point, though, where it isn't a benefit and it simply just is more cost. 2008, when talking, and you would ask, what are we doing differently? The drastic change from this book through 8 and the downturn to what we have now is one big reason when I talk to home builders as to why they can't build back to, say, $150,000 house. The costs associated with the systems, the houses, one comment was made that the house has gotten so tight that they had to actually add a $10,000 airflow system inside a house just to get air to move inside of it because we put so much insulation and tighten these houses up so tight they don't breathe naturally, which they're supposed to. That's something I didn't know. Were you guys aware of that? All that did was add money to the house. You're going to lose energy, right?
I guess kind of to shorten this up.
Yeah.
If you could look, if somebody was like, okay, what's wrong with the regulations? Does anybody, is there a reference that anybody could go to?
No.
That could say these are the problems?
No, that's kind of my point of I think you have to have somebody, you have to have some experts in the room that understand this. And we're working on this now. And then I think you have to have somebody do a third party do a study that says in 2000, this was the structural code. And between there and there, these are the things that the building community thinks have added more cost with no benefit. And let's do a cost benefit analysis. What was the intention of the update? What does it yield? And what does it do today? And then if everybody agrees, like, oh, you can still leave it in the code, but it's not minimum. We can get back to a minimum of housing standards, right?
But how do we, let's say today we don't update the codes for the next 30 years.
Yep.
Do you think that is a benefit to society when in 30 years we could have a lot of advancements in technology that states what we're doing today is horrible, but because we decided to freeze the code for 30 years, we're not even, you kind of get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
I think
are we not going to update the codes?
Oh, no, I think you're thinking of that in a vacuum, right? Nothing in this world happens in a vacuum. There's no outside forces. I think if you can get down to a base code that says, look, this is a safe house. This is a house that meets life safety. This is the minimums, and this is what we can build. We think we can build a single family house for. And this is what you could do if you wanted to add this, and this. I think you can get to a place where you're always looking at systems and things, right? But for example, one thing I'm hearing is the next set of codes is going to require 2x6 construction only and not any 2x4 construction. This is coming from my builders. Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
But do you run the risk of kind of, if you can afford it, you could get a super safe home. If you can't afford it, your house might be safe or not.
No, I think that is not where we're at today.
But
It'd be like you can have an iPhone or you can have a flip phone. Do they both make phone calls? Now texting's a little harder on the flip phone, but maybe I don't want to text and I just need to call you. Do I need an iPhone for that?
getting out your house might be harder in a fire with the less safe home than a super safe home.
I don't know that that is a true
It could be
comparison.
possible. We don't
Well,
know
sure.
if it's true,
We could
but
have a lot of possibilities,
yeah.
but at the end of the day, you're not going to go back to where less exits. That's not what's driving the price of the home up. But if you add sprinklers at every single family house, you're going to add tens of thousands of dollars of costs. We think that
But maybe more sprinklers save a family of 5 from dying in a fire.
I would argue
Versus-
your smoke detectors will do all of that at
But
less cost.
I'm just saying.
And by the way, sprinkler systems aren't put into structures to save lives. They're to save the asset. It's
Yeah,
an
but-
insurance issue.
Could potentially save lives too.
Sure.
All right.
Me putting myself in a bubble could save my life too, but maybe not.
Not
right.
going outside.
So I guess my point is, we got to get past the polarization of the conversation, and we got to come to a point where we're both trying to solve this problem. Are there things in these books that are good? 100%. Are there things we don't want to go back to in the development, real estate, and building community? 100%. But are things in here that we know just add costs and have very little benefit? 100%. And I
guess
think
my
there's a
hope
meeting.
is you and whoever you're cool with, y'all could go through this book and point out everything that's wrong and send it to this committee. I would love to see that.
I'm working on it. And it won't be everything's wrong. It's just it needs to be an objective cost benefit analysis. Wrong or right's not the way I think the lens we should look at it, right? Is this a benefit to somebody who can't afford a house? If it's not, then why is it required? If they can afford it, great, right? But if not, I can still build you a house and get you started so that maybe your next house, you can have all the bells and whistles you'd like. I don't know. That's where we got to get to.
I understand that. But it's just thinking about society. We could potentially have one side of a city that is less safe than the other with that frame of mind.
I think the safety argument in 2024 is really difficult to make.
I don't know with that.
How many people die from their homes that were built 30 years ago? I'm not aware of very many because of some structural or some component failure that doesn't involve a natural disaster or some other type of thing. Just walking in my house, people aren't unsafe in their homes that they've been built in the last, a long time.
Anything is possible though.
Anything, and if that's the direction we go, I think we have a hard time solving this problem. I guess that would be my point. I don't want to deal with extremes. Let's just come to some middle ground of conversation. Same thing with zoning and subdivision. Let's just have some common sense conversations.
I don't think it's extreme though to make sure that everyone that's buying a house is in like their safety.
Let me ask this
no matter
question.
What your income level?
Let's go to the automobile side of things. What was your first car? How old was it?
It was old.
Yeah, mine too. 76 Ford Granada. That thing was a tank. And I didn't die in it, driving it, right? Now I have a 2019 Dodge Ram. It has all the bells and whistles, and it's falling apart, and it's 5 years old.
Just
Newer
because
isn't always
you
better.
Doesn't mean it was safe.
Sure, it was safe.
But
I didn't die. I'm here. You didn't either.
But other people that probably drove that same model of car might have faced a different risk because of a recall or something like that as well. So you got to think about that. Just because your car came off the production line safe doesn't mean there were others in that bunch that were safe.
And do we have some regulatory things in place that solve for that? The answer is yes.
Yeah. And then
But you
you'll
can't solve
argue
for
that
everything.
then you'll argue that it's expensive.
A recall is not expensive.
I'm
It's just
talking about like
a mistake. Huh?
the cost of cars currently.
Cost of cars are expensive.
Yeah.
If you bought one recently. Same thing with housing.
Yeah.
So 80-20. Can we get to 80%? That'd be my comment.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Help Senator Love.
Thank you. My first car was a 1950 Buick, and I wish I had it back.
See? No cell phones. Let's just make a compact right now.
3 weeks ago, I was down in a place called Lake City, Florida, visiting a couple of contractors. They built a similar house. One contractor is also a contractor up here in Nebraska. They built a similar house down there for $30,000 less.
Okay.
Because of building codes and supply. But it was a lot cheaper to build the house down there. And so they've moved a lot of their operation down there to build nice houses. They just went through a hurricane. Lake City was dead centered on that hurricane. They just lost a few shingles off the top of their house. So 140 mile an hour winds were safe enough with less building codes. Do building codes save lives? Sure they do.
For sure.
Sure they do. Do we need all the things in the International Building Code? No.
That would be my agreement.
Yeah.
I just don't know what they are.
Yeah.
So one thing I was hoping that maybe, my point is, if part of this resolution would be to look at that. I mean, there's something I think the state could get involved in and spearhead a true cost benefit analysis of building codes and just see what's that look like. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Blunt? No question? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair McKinney and members of the Urban Affairs Committee, my name is Todd Stubendek. That's TODDSTUBBENDIECK. I'm the State Director of AARP Nebraska and appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I'm going to start with a story about my mom. And every time I do this, my mom hates it. So if any of you run into her, please don't tell her I've done this again where I'm talking about her. My mom lives in Holdridge, Nebraska. She is widowed. She's still living in the same large single-family home where she raised us kids. It's way too much house for her. I am scared to death that we'll find her at the bottom of the stairs one day. But there's not another option for her. And she's certainly not ready for assisted living, but there's not another option in Holdridge, Nebraska for her to move into. There's not a duplex or a townhome option for her in that city. Now, I didn't pull Holdridge's zoning codes to see if such things are allowed or not allowed. But we do know in a lot of places, those sorts of types of housing are not allowed to be built. AARP cares about this because we know that as people get older, what they want to do is age in place. We did a 2022 survey of age people 45 plus in Nebraska, and 84% said aging in their homes, staying in that low civil care was extremely or very important to them. And so we think that we need to find solutions that help create more age-friendly, affordable housing options, especially in Nebraska. We've talked a little bit about sort of local control, and that's something we've acknowledged is extremely important. But I think we also need to talk about that sort of a community by community basis of doing this can be very slow, and I'm worried about if it's just community by community, it's not getting done, and we're not addressing this need for more affordable and age-friendly housing. Omaha has done great stuff. They put together their housing affordability action plan that was approved by the city council in 2022 that had some great recommendations for zoning changes that they wanted to make with accessory dwelling units and missing middle housing. Well, earlier this year, 2024, they did pass the zoning changes for accessory dwelling units, but still have not seen anything done on the recommendations, their own recommendations for missing middle housing, duplexes, townhomes, and those sort of things. So it's just an acknowledgement that we certainly understand local control, but let's also understand that community by community, city council by city council, this process of removing regulatory burdens can also be very, very slow. So, like I said, earlier this year, we testified in support of LB 1165 and 1166, and we acknowledged those concerns about local control. But across the country, we're starting to see state legislatures step up and pass legislation that will design to loosen these barriers that serve to keep us from building housing. So I think that this committee and a whole bunch of smart people are going to come talk after I'm done. I think we can come up with ways to craft legislation that doesn't necessarily mandate, but creates incentives that encourages communities to change the zoning to allow this sort of housing to be built. And again, hopefully we can be a part of that process as it moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Senator Blood?
So did you say that, was it Hebron,
Holdridge.
Holdridge, sorry.
Yep.
Holdridge, there's so many H names in Nebraska. That they did have because if I remember correctly, this committee several years ago passed a bill that every year the municipalities have to turn in a affordable housing report, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think that's only the 11 largest, correct?
Yes,
Communities.
it is.
So Holdridge unfortunately doesn't qualify as in
so
that.
that actually might be part of the issue.
True.
If there's no expectation, then why would they do this?
Mhm.
I've read a couple of reports and I'm pretty sure AARP did one of them. Isn't there also the factor that as we allow seniors to age in place by allowing them a smaller environment, that also opens up housing for people looking for affordable housing?
If I would have remembered that point in my mom's story, I would have said if she'd had another option to move to, we could probably convince her to downsize. And by the way, then that opens up her house to a younger couple.
Right.
It restores a cycle of housing that we used to have, but has sort of stopped now that we don't build much between the large single family home and maybe high-rise apartments in larger cities.
Well, the family home has changed very much. It used to be generations lived in
True.
family homes. And,
True.
families stayed together in usually the same area. Now we're very transient.
Yep.
So I think that's part of the problem as well.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No? Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
testimony.
Appreciate it.
Other proponents?
Good afternoon, Chair McKinney and members of the Urban Affairs Committee. My name is Kevin Lockhart. That's Kevin Lockhart. I'm president of a company called MBI Building Systems and Tiny Mod LLC. Very appreciative to testify here today and to contribute to the study group's exploration of the opportunities of off-site construction. This forward-thinking building approach offers a practical solution to the challenges of affordable housing. I'm not here to promote my company, but to provide valuable insights on how to make this alternative construction method work. I've been involved in over $1 billion worth of modular construction throughout North America. And I'll share both of the successes that I've learned from these experiences, along with a step-by-step guide to help builders integrate this method into their offerings. I've included 2 handouts. The first one is an example for median income housing. This illustrates a median household income that suggested PITI monthly payment. As you read through these numbers, I'm confident we can all agree we need a solution that everyone falls into this category. And by relaxing land use red tape regulations, this alternative construction method can make a significant progress in this sector. I put a couple modular home mythbusters down below to read. 1, all modular homes are built to that same code at the book that was up here, the ICC code. 2, it has an architectural appeal to customize. Modular homes apply for the same financing, working right now with Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. And modular homes are valued and appraised exactly like site built. If you turn it over, I've put together 2 formulas here. 2 examples of a 1,200 square foot home on a finished full basement. Both of them meet PITI requirements. When scaled up, the cost efficiency becomes even more apparent. So both of these homes on a full basement meet median income. That's here in Nebraska, built by our company. Or any builder in here that would like to look at modular homes. Down below, I've done 3, actually there's 4 accessory dwelling units that have already been pre-approved by the Omaha Building Department and will be showcased on the city's website as part of their ADU approved plans.
Thank you.
If you look at the second handout, excuse me, sorry.
I'll let you finish.
Okay. Second handout, we just put this together because this is a project we're doing in southeast Kansas that's designed around courtyard setting using ADUs and high density. So we were able to get 7 ADUs on an 80 by 150 lot with a courthouse setting. The 2-story have elevator, so this is also an option for senior housing.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I got a question. Why is it was stated earlier that we have 2 modular home developers in the state, but all of their modular home sales are pretty much outside the state. So why is that?
So hate to admit that is an incorrect statement. And I've got this Tiny Mod LLC is a Colorado corporation. MBI is a Nebraska corporation. I'm president of both corporations. And we actually have 4 manufacturers in Nebraska. And it is definitely cheaper to build in Nebraska than Colorado. The labor force in Colorado kills it. Go to Florida and you're less expensive. So that's not a true statement.
What do you think is the pushback to developing more modular homes in the state? Is it just myths or just a lack of education around them?
Yeah, I think it's lack of education. I was actually in Asheville, North Carolina 2 weeks ago, right before the storm, and spoke before a committee down up there on education on modular homes. There's a community up there that's got about 400 units. That is beautiful, but it's really a lack of education. And when you hear modular home, a lot of people think manufactured home, mobile home. And so they still think that square box, or it's going to decrease the value of my home. All myth busters, because today's modular homes are all custom built. If you look at the picture, on that first handout, it's a very aesthetic 1,200 square foot home.
What's the difference in construction time between regular construction versus modular construction?
So turnkey, digging dirt to moving in is 90 days. And that's one of the biggest expenses of construction today is the carrying cost. So you've got, it carries out, more months than 90 days.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? No, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairperson McKinney and members of the Urban Affairs Committee. My name is Jonathan Jank, Jonathan. I serve as the President and CEO for the Seward County Chamber and Development Partnership. Our organization is a sole combined Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development organization in Seward County with a standing membership of approximately 265 public and private sector business partners. I'm an active member of the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce, Nebraska Economic Developers Association, and a past president of the Nebraska Chambers Association. On behalf of our organization and the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to go on record and enter the testimony that I'm providing on housing regulations in Seward County and Nebraska in light of Legislative Resolution 441. As we examine the impact of local housing regulations on Nebraska's housing supply, it's essential to address the need for more friendly zoning laws that encourage increased housing density. In Seward County, we face significant challenges related to housing affordability and availability. By implementing zoning regulations that promote higher density development, we can help keep housing costs down and provide more options for our residents. For example, our organization is currently developing a small subdivision called Bronco Heights in the village of Utica. This will be the first subdivision developed in the community in 20 years and could easily result in a 5% population growth for the village once completed. Using rural workforce housing funds, Bronco Heights provides new housing options that align with the needs of the local teachers, welders, and the general local workforce. Unfortunately, this project has been complicated and delayed by zoning change requests to allow for multifamily dwellings in the district. Further, excessive front and rear yard requirements limit the buildable space for each lot and reduce their attractiveness for home builders and home buyers. Zoning inefficiencies like the ones we've experienced may, in some instances, reduce the impact of state dollars dedicated to housing development. Regulations that promote density would help these funds go further to Nebraska communities. As mentioned, Bronco Heights would not be possible without the use of Seward County's rural workforce housing funds. In 2022, our organization distributed $1.263 million of rural workforce housing funds to 4 projects in Utica, Milford, and Seward. These projects include both ground-up construction of new apartments and townhouses, as well as the conversion of 2 former nursing homes into apartments and affordable housing lots. Together, these 4 projects will create 91 new housing units and $15.7 million in total investments. We have already dispersed some of our next round of $1.134 million of rural workforce housing funds and anticipate creating at least another 71 new housing units. I urge the committee to consider the importance of friendly zoning regulations in facilitating housing development throughout Nebraska. Coupled with existing housing programs such as the rural workforce housing funds, these regulatory changes can enhance our communities, attract new residents, and ensure that our housing supply meets the need of our workforce. In the past, this committee has attempted to address zoning regulations with some changes that would apply statewide. We sympathize with those concerned about how these requirements could undermine local control. A compromise this committee could consider would be retooling current or future housing funds to assign greater weight towards projects located in communities that have undertaken pro-density regulatory reforms through standard local processes. The committee could craft best practice regulations that communities around Nebraska could look for guidance. We think this could strike a middle ground between preserving local control and ensuring the legislature allocates dollars most efficiently to address Nebraska's significant housing challenges. With that, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Senator Blood?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, you're doing such a great job in Seward. I've been following your career, and good job.
Thank you.
So are you saying that Utica has not been open to adding more homes to a denser area? Is that what you're telling me?
Really finding available land is the biggest challenge, just in general. Really finding ground, and I would say actually extending utilities is the biggest cost involved. So infrastructure improvements are really a challenge in rural Nebraska. And I'd say for communities like Utica of 850 population and below, there's just the cost of infrastructure in general, but also.
How would that change with zoning, though?
Yeah, but I'm just saying that that's a big cost, but I would also say that zoning regulations do make an impact. And again, for example, the 25-foot setback front and rear, that makes a difference on how much of a home we potentially can build in that existing district. And I'm not saying we should be prescriptive, just more of a best practice, more of a carrot approach as opposed to a stick approach, if we would have some zoning best practices to share.
So are you saying that they're not open to doing that, or that they're dragging their feet, or?
So I think from a practical standpoint, community of 850, they try to update these approximately every 10 years, but they can only afford so much. So I think if the state would potentially partner on the ability to say, here are some best practices, as they would partner with public and private sector to come up with some best practices, that would help a smaller community like Utica to say, hey, this is a best practice. It would incentivize our ability to pursue additional rural workforce housing funds in the future. I think they'd be more apt to support something like that.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Senator Lowe?
How many units were going to go into the Bronco Heights?
Yeah, 14 total units.
14. And the infrastructure would be able to handle the 14 units?
It is, and I'll just say it was incredibly expensive, about $750,000 to get those 14 lots together. We had to use rural workforce housing funds and tax increment financing to try to create affordable lots.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You mentioned zoning inefficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
Could you send a list of zoning inefficiencies that you came across to the
Sure.
committee?
Yeah, I'd be happy
I
to
would
do
like
that.
to see those, just because we keep hearing that zoning is the issue, but nobody's really been specific on what zoning policies are the problem.
Yeah, and just not off the top of my head, individual ones, but what I'll say is, we have 10 municipalities in Seward County, and all of them, actually 2 of them don't have zoning, but the 8 that do, and actually our county does as well, they're all different.
Okay.
And so when I'm trying to attract investment, even for our local builders, but attract outside investment to try to create a developer that can do higher density, they're having to essentially guess between each one of these municipalities about what they could build there. And time is money. And so what I'm advocating for ultimately is a best practice to say these zoning regulations are safe, but they also help with affordability. And that could incentivize developers to come in, and also for local builders to have more sense of predictability in what they could build in the future.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Other proponents?
Good afternoon, Senator McKinney, members of the committee. My name's Fred Hoppy. I'm a builder in the state. We develop across the state. The first thing I want to tell you is housing pays for itself. I should spell my name, I guess. Fred, F-R-E-D, Hoppy, H-O-P-P-E. Thank you, Senator. I want to tell you, housing pays for itself. You got to have people living in your towns to spend money in grocery stores, to spend money to buy cars in that town, to do whatever it takes. So the people that live in the houses we build, they're the ones who are members of your communities. Housing pays for itself. But let me give you another example of why and how housing can pay for itself. And it relates to your questions earlier about zoning. First of all, providing housing has two facets. One, you have to develop lots or the ground on which you're going to put the housing. Number two, you got to build the box. You've heard earlier about code issues with building the box and how that can make housing more expensive. There are also design standard issues dealing with zoning for one, or design standards on creating neighborhoods, creating the land use, the land that you're going to put the lots, we're going to put the housing on. Now, land development is linear. In other words, if a 50-foot lot is half as expensive to put on the street as a 100-foot lot, it's linear. You multiply the length of the sewer and the length of the pipes for water and storm sewer, all of those things. Two things are important to provide affordable housing. For us anyway, we take density and scale. In other words, it's very expensive for us to build 2 homes in Pender, Nebraska, or 2 duplexes in Pender, Nebraska. That is probably 20% more expensive than building 20 on a 2 basis in Lincoln, or we'd probably build 40 in Lincoln or 40 in Sarpy County. So to get to my point, when the cost of doing business is an issue for every builder, you have to make money, you're not going to build. So for instance, in Grand Island, when I say housing doesn't pay for itself, we did a subdivision that was in a TIF district, and we used TIF. And in it, our agreement was, we'll build the houses and sell them at cost, plus 10. But we'll take the TIF to pay for the development of the lots. In that case, essentially, people paying their taxes through the TIF process paid for their lots, housing paid for itself. The housing itself paid for the infrastructure we put in place. And it's worked really great. In a time where it's very difficult to be selling houses, median income and below,
Ask you to wrap up.
I can finish. It's shortly. In any case, housing pays for itself. Grand Island specifically, I told Chad Nabity, who's the planning director, I'd give him kudos. They developed a specific zoning classification for small lots, which basically allows us to build with narrow lots and zero lot lines, which make it a lot cheaper to construct. So I'd answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No? Thank you.
Yep.
Other proponents? Yeah, all right. That's what I thought.
Good afternoon, Chairman McKinney, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Corby Gilbertson. It's spelled KorbyGilbertson. Appearing today as a registered lobbyist on behalf of the Metro Omaha Builders Association and Home Builders Association of Lincoln Coalition. What you're getting passed around, I decided I could sit up here for an hour and go through all of the comments that when we requested, I requested actual examples. And I think that's what Senator Blood has kind of been asking for. Give us some specific examples that show the committee how different codes affect different things. And one of the things I want to point out to begin with is you have many different codes, and you saw the building code that got set up here earlier. Then you also have the energy code, and you also have the electrical code, and you adopt those each year, or you extend the date for the adoption of previous years. The legislature adopts those, and then certain cities adopt them, not across the state. But what the home builders are concerned with, and what I think that they would argue we need to look at, is whether or not things actually impact life safety issues, or if you're just trying to have a state-of-the-art home. When you look at different things that are being required in the new codes, for example, electric vehicle charging ports in every garage. You have to have solar panel ports in every home. Things like that don't necessarily add to the safety, but they definitely add to the cost of the home. Both of those sheets kind of give you an idea of some of the newer requirements that are coming on through the energy code. Those are from Lincoln and Omaha. Some of the other things I wanted to point out is if you just look at permitting fees. In Omaha, permitting fees for a ranch home less than 2,000 square feet in 2023 was right at $7,000. In 2025, that will go up to almost $8,000. So that increase compared to the same place that the same size of home being built in Des Moines is $3,000 in building permit fees. Looking at how water is installed in different developments, on whether or not, if you're on one side of the street, you already have water access. If you live on the opposite side of the street, they have to dig under the street and go over and provide the water for that house. Do you think people that live on the other side of the house should have to pay more just to have water access? So those are types of examples that Nebraska does things differently that might be a little more costly than other states do things, and things that we think you should consider in the future. Like I said, there's a bunch of different examples, and I'd be happy to talk about others, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Why are the permitting fees so high?
That's a good question. They're set by the municipalities.
Is it, I guess it's an assumption, not fact. Is it a money maker for them?
I would guess that they would argue it covers the cost that they have in enforcing the codes that they enforce. I can give you a specific, I live outside of the city limits in the county. And when I live on an acreage, when I first bought my acreage, I only had 3 acres. So I had to have architect stamped plans for an outbuilding. I bought 36 more acres right next to my initial land. I no longer had to even get anything approved for my plans to be able to build another outbuilding out there. That did not make either of those outbuildings any safer. So I think those are the type of issues that the legislature needs to consider, and whether or not we have things that are actually impacting life safety, or if we're doing things just to have bigger and better.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Could you send a list of like those permanent fees differences?
Yeah.
What you just stated to my office?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
Other testifiers? Sorry, I've been saying proponents, opponents. It's just testifiers. So that's on me.
Good afternoon. My name is John Nebel, Jonnebel. I'm president of the Nebraska State Council of Electrical Workers. I'm not, I put on my sheet that I'm an opponent. I'm not an opponent of trying to find a solution for affordable housing or anything, but I am an opponent of some of the statements that were said here today. So I just wanted to clarify on a couple things. I didn't bring my code book, but I can tell you that mine has gotten just as thick over the last 100 years. And the reason for that, I think a lot of people spoke to, are the life safety things. When my trade was started, the average construction or the average electrician career was also the lifespan of about 3 years. At this point, we can last 40 years, make a whole career of it. And that, I think, is attributed to the code book that is now 800 pages long and continually correcting the problems we have with installing and maintaining the electricity in our country. And I just wanted to remind everybody about the last couple sessions that we've been having a fight to adopt the latest electrical code. And what that fight was about was, one, it put the reciprocity of my trade into contention. If we weren't going to adopt the code, I was no longer going to be able to reciprocity with other states. So that would have caused a lot of friction that I think a lot of people want not to see. And the second one was some folks behind us, or behind me, said that there was a cost overrun because of all these regulations. And what we settled on was an adoption of the code that took out, carved out specific life safety codes that were put in place to make it safer for me to do my job, for kids to be in the house, for firefighters to put out the fires. So I just wanted to clear the record on that, that it's not, when somebody comes up here and says that we need to start deregulating and go back to a moratorium on codes, but not life safety. No, it specifically was life safety. And one of the codes I want to talk about was, to your point, Senator McKinney, do people die? Yes, people do die. And it was a child that got caught behind a dryer, and the dryer receptacle was not GFCI protected. So they changed that in the code. We carved it out in our adoption of it. Another one was disconnect on the outside of a building so firefighters wouldn't have to disconnect live power and have arc flash burns when they go to put out a fire. We carved that out because we thought it cost too much. So we are putting a price on life, and we should really consider that when we talk about just deregulating and going to a moratorium on codes. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Lowe?
Thank you. Thank you for testifying. You said that the average span of electrical work was 3 years, and now it's 40.
Yes.
Because of codes?
Because codes, yes. So part of my job, I'm a union person and advocating for life safety and safety on the job. When we first started our union in 1892, the average career life of an electrician was about 3 years, just because it was such a dangerous job. started instituting a code book, started developing proper methods of installing electricity and maintaining and working on it. And yeah, the codes are what's effectively saving our lives and making our careers.
So how long has it been, 40 years, that you've been able to survive? 1893, 1894?
We approved a couple retirements last night of some folks that have been in for 40 years. So it's, I think they got in the 80s and now they're getting out with a retirement. So yeah.
I just know that I grew up in a house with knob and tube. And so electrical has come a long way since then.
Yes.
And then that was late 1800 house.
And it's gotten considerably more dangerous. Now we have to wear suits. The part of that is the grid is not able to keep up, so they're pushing more electricity through the grid and through the infrastructure than the actual capacity of the wiring can handle. So there are people still dying in the trade. I've been on sites where people have died, yes, and it's not fun, but it's part of it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Blunt?
Thank you, Chair. John, were you in on those conversations when we had corporate farms coming in and they wanted us to change the rules to allow people that weren't qualified to work with electricity?
Yes.
So since then, we've seen several fires as a result of.
Yeah. It's when we fail to adopt this industry standard, and that's what these updates are. It's the industry gets together and says, hey, we've recognized we've done things to substandard level. We can do it better now, and that's what we should adopt the better practices. When we fail to do that, you get into a situation where people are doing work that they shouldn't be doing because they've never been trained on the best practices. So,
Well, and best practices are important, but it also requires someone to be qualified to do those best practices, correct?
very much so, yes.
So it sounds like you guys aren't opposed to looking at zoning and changing zoning and opening things up to more housing, but it sounds like your concern is what your concern always is, which is let's make sure that we're not going backwards when it comes to public safety.
Correct. Yeah, we want to make sure everybody's competent when they're out there building the country that we're all trying to live in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Lowe?
Thank you. Can't you say no to a project if you don't feel it's safe? And can't you build it better if you want to?
Always.
And build it safe?
I want to. I advocate for that, but there's considerable downward pressure to keep costs low. And if the minimum is here and the standard is up here, the contractor, the general contractor, the developer are all going to say, do the minimum unless the customer is going to pay for more. And a lot of times the customer has no idea what more means. They just know that I'm buying a new house. I'll bet you it's the best product on the market today. What they might not know is that we failed to adopt the last several codes. And it's not the best product, but it's the minimum that we need to do in this state in order to get something turnkey ready. So we always want to, but it's the downward pressure of cost cutting measures, I think, is what keeps us from doing it.
Can't you suggest putting in a breaker to a fault breaker behind the washer or dryer?
For sure.
It cuts off.
If I was on a service call or something and I got the opportunity to talk directly to the customer, yeah, I probably would do that. But the way I think the infrastructure is set up is that the subs never have the ability to go in and have that conversation. It's more of a salesperson with the home builder to say, this is what we're doing, this is the packages, and I'm not going to be there advocating for a better electrical product.
Thank you. Senator Blunt?
Thank you. Sorry, you brought up another question with that. So if we did just the base, right? This is what I keep hearing people when I talk about. What would happen when it was inspected? I mean, wouldn't we have a whole nother issue with some of these inspections? Because there is the book and there all are these guidelines, and these guidelines are put in place for public safety. And so if we take it upon ourselves to say, okay, well, maybe we don't have to have it at this level, it has to be at this level. What's going to happen when they come in and inspect?
if we've never adopted that code, then the inspectors are never gonna inspect at that level. And so they're gonna say, yep, that's okay here. And we'll just keep moving on and none the wiser, I suppose, if you don't know the electrical code has been shifted, then you probably wouldn't even ask the question of, could this have been better?
So it sounds like we're doing kind of a buyer beware thing for the consumer.
Yes.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Thank you, John.
You bet.
Yep. Other testimony?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Lynn Rex, Lynnrex, representing the League of Nebraska Municipalities. I really didn't know how to fill out the actual form. I put opposition, but in fact, it's not really opposition. The league is always willing to work with stakeholders. And I just wanted to clarify a few issues here. At our conference, which has just been going on for the last few days, we had yet more trainings by NIFA on the Affordable Housing Toolkit. That's being used by municipalities all across the state. In fact, David Young, who testified today, has worked with Columbus, North Platte, and other communities. And it involves a whole process where stakeholders get together involving the municipality on how can they deal with certain zoning issues. For example, what Fred Hoppy did in Grand Island is great. Christy and I, in the Urban Affairs Committee, under a different chairman, actually toured Grand Island. I don't know, Senator Lowe, if you and Senator Blood were on that tour or not. It's a great thing what they did. But again, it was in collaboration with the municipality on how to do it, and a much different scenario, as others have said, when you are working with a larger community where the developer can come in and build a boatload of houses, if you will, as opposed to what I think one of the testifiers said, which is 20% more if you're going to build that same house in Pender. That's why the testimony you're hearing today as well on modular homes. That is one of the ideas that has come forward with a strategic housing council group in terms of how can we do that. And I think there's a question too. I was curious that the gentleman indicated there are 4 now companies doing this, but I thought one of the issues was that a lot of those modular homes, it's not the cost of building those homes as much as where are they being sold then after you build the homes. Because one of the things I think is important to look at as a state is that something to incentivize? So we have more of that, because clearly our smaller municipalities, and in some of the work on affordable housing, one of the things that has come forward is that if you're dealing with, for example, Gothenburg or Minutair, some of those municipalities, clearly it's going to be 1 or 2 houses, and so maybe at the most. And so you want to be able to afford that and put it together in a way that's going to be beneficial for not just the community, but it's also safe. And I just wanted to underscore the point, with my time running out here, that before you remove some type of regulation, you want to know why it was put there. Because this same committee has also had hearings over the years involving Kearney that you may or may not remember, about why certain things weren't done and why certain protections weren't put in place. So to your point, Senator McKinney, there's the issue of, yes, you want homes safe. And when somebody buys that home, you want to make sure that it's safe, regardless of what the price point is. If you're dealing with a home that's $150,000, a home that's $300,000, or a home that's over $1 million, then when somebody buys that, they can be assured it's safe. And I think what the gentleman before me was testifying about is that clearly people want to keep costs down. Municipalities want to keep costs down. One of these studies that was done, and I know that there's been lots of conversation, if I could complete just for a second. There's been a lot of conversation about national studies or other studies about, oh my gosh, it's the zoning that's raising the cost. For example, in Georgia, they had the funds, which our league right now doesn't have, but at some point we may collaborate with others to do a similar type of study that the Georgia Municipal League did, and I'm happy to provide you with a copy of that, showing that predominantly it is the cost of labor, the cost of product, and also just basically the scale involved. One of the national models for missing middle is in Papillion, Nebraska, an extraordinary Shadow Lake. So when you're dealing with the larger municipalities, clearly you have a lot more option in terms of what they could do in scope, just like Fred Hoppy did in Grand Island. Same thing though with the smaller communities. We want to make sure that those smaller communities also have the types of options that I think modular homes could provide. So in closing, we're more than happy as always to work with the committee I think the Affordable Housing Toolkit is just a fantastic thing that NIFE has put together. I really appreciate the conversation by the individual from Seward talking about incentivizing. Carrots work a whole lot better than sticks, especially if what you want to do is make sure that you have adequate housing across the state. And our bedroom communities and the smaller communities play such a critical role in not just workforce housing, but affordable housing and what can be done no matter where you are in the state. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Senator Blood?
Thank you, Senator Kenny. Be honest, just, which you always are, I'm not worried about it. So do you think that in general that municipalities are not willing to be open to zoning changes?
The answer is I think that there are municipalities across the state. I don't know of one that doesn't want to have more housing.
Right.
They want it safe. In terms of the zoning, and one of the issues that we dealt with, I believe it was Senator Matt Hansen that brought before this committee proposals, and before what was negotiated, which became the missing middle legislation, to make sure that municipalities are providing areas in their communities for different types of housing, for different types of density, but also the concern that in terms of R1, that you're making sure that you have a community that gives those options, but you don't necessarily have to have all different types. Not every part of the community has to be the same. In other words, you want to make sure that you incentivize people for moving there as well and staying there. So from a zoning perspective, we have city manager administrators across the state that are prepared to sit down and work with builders and with others. But I also think too with zoning, there's a real reason for zoning. And I'm not going to mention the names of a couple communities that if you drove through them, you would think, oh my gosh, they don't have a zoning code because of what you have in different places in that community. So, it's really important to do it and do it right. And I think everybody in this room wants to be a part of that solution. So there's just a way to do it right. But do I think that folks are fundamentally saying, no, we don't want any zoning changes? That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is it's got to be done in a very strategic way and in a way that you don't jeopardize folks that are saying, okay, if that's what you're going to do. So for example, one of the examples that was brought forward, I think a couple hearings ago, and Elsa, you may remember this hearing, where an individual testified and said, look, if I'm going to be building a $250,000 home, for example, or whatever that home cost may be, whatever that price point may be, then I want to be sure that in that area, when I'm making that investment, which for most people, their home is the most significant investment they make financially, that investment is making protected. I want to have options, but I want to make sure that it's going to be compatible with the other housing in that area. And yet that was one of the fundamental issues that was brought forward. Don Wesley, who used to be the mayor of Lincoln, played a critical role in negotiating with Senator Wayne and this committee on the fact that you have to also preserve the integrity of neighborhoods. And they worked hard in Lincoln and other communities to do that. But you absolutely have to have and make sure that there's affordable housing efforts all across the city.
Which I think I said at the beginning of the hearing when I talked about the purpose of zoning.
Absolutely.
And it also allows for public input, which
yes,
I think we're forgetting about because they also have to live in that community. So.
And the village vice president, president of the village of Utica, Nebraska, attended our conference. She's asked for a meeting with us because they want to meet with the county and talk about some of the issues that they can do to try to address some of these various issues. And so Christy Lash and I will be doing that.
So what I've heard so far, it just sounds like we need to get more people together. So I'm curious why it's coming to us. Again, I go back to my municipal background, is that we don't need the state to tell us how to do our business. We need the state to support our business. And I'm worried that we might big brother this to death and we won't get what we really want to accomplish.
Well, my personal view, and I would say, our board has not voted on this, but that affordable housing work kit and that toolkit is fundamental to the answer that you're looking at here. Because as a condition of implementing that, and they're doing it, like I said, North Platte, other communities across the state, and that's what it's about, getting all the stakeholders, the folks that are sitting in this room together. And so it's a different solution for Fred Hoppe to go to Grand Island than it is if he's going to go to Pender. And he kind of pointed that out. But Pender, Nebraska also needs affordable housing. And maybe that's where the modular homes come into play. And so it seemed, if it is true, and I don't know that it is, I don't know, that the modular homes being built in Nebraska, whether it's, I heard it was 2, but if it is in fact 4, that's even better. But if they're being sold in Nebraska, or are they being sold elsewhere? I thought that was your question, and maybe I missed it, but I thought the question was not just the cost. I think the answer that was given is that it costs less to do some of it in Nebraska than it would in another state. That's great, but are those homes then being sold in Nebraska? Are they being whole? Because it would make no sense for the state of Nebraska to financially subsidize firms building modular homes in Nebraska if in fact the homes then are going to be sold elsewhere. I mean, I know there's legal issues, interstate commerce issues, all kinds of things that come into play here, but I think all of those things strategically need to be addressed. But in terms of on an individual basis, city by city, village by village, of which we have 527, one size fits all is not the answer. It's never been the answer. And it's really important to make sure, though, that we include not just Omaha, Lincoln, the cities of the first class, where it is cost effective and you have volume involved, but where you have the smaller communities involved too, because they play a critical role in the viability of the state and the workforce.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Are there any other testifiers on this? No. Oh, okay.
Good afternoon, Chairman McKinney and members of the Urban Affairs Committee. My name is Alex DeGarmo, ALEXDEGARMO. I'm appearing before you today as my role as Chairman of the Cass County Board of Commissioners. I'd like to state for the record that I'm taking vacation time from Senator Armendariz' office in order to testify before you today. I'd like to touch on a few of the issues we're seeing in Cass County that are affecting housing availability and affordability. Not just zoning, but some of the other broader issues that I think that as a committee we should be looking at. Cass County is in a very unique position, situated right between Lincoln and Omaha. Eagle is 2 miles, 3 miles from the Lancaster County line. Plattsmouth is very, very close to Sarpy County. And we're really seeing a lot of growth in those corridors. So I want to speak specifically to my district, which is District 3, the northwestern part of Cass County, which includes the communities of Alva, Eagle, Elmwood, Murdoch, and Greenwood. So first of all, with zoning, something that we're seeing countywide, I know AARP touched on this earlier, is accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. So we're not just seeing demand for those from the aging population that either doesn't want to or can't go to a nursing home because of lack of bed space. We're starting to see families wanting to build ADUs for their kids just because of the lack of affordable housing. So just for reference, pulled this off of Zillow today. In my district, there are 7 houses for sale, with the cheapest house being $370,000. That's just out of reach for the average Nebraskan. Any house that comes up in my district for sale at an affordable price is gone within 48 hours. If it's listed on a Friday, it's gone by Monday morning. So when it goes to ADUs, as Senator Blood mentioned earlier, it's expensive for counties to redo zoning books. And where I see the Urban Affairs Committee coming in would be if we can have a state recommended zoning for ADUs that then the county would have the ability to adopt. Not being forced, but have the ability to adopt. I think that would be very helpful for us. Otherwise, we'll have to hire an outside firm, redo it, going into the zoning changes. The last time we did our zoning changes, it took us 3 or 4, 5 meetings to get through that. And that doesn't count the time that the Planning and Zoning Commission put into that. Another thing potentially is a shot clock. I know that there's been some opposition from counties on that before. But I believe if we work together, the state and the counties, I think we can find a reasonable amount of time to put on residential permitting. As I know the permitting process, as mentioned earlier, is expensive and takes a long time. Some of the other reasons that we're seeing a lack of availability, the biggest one in infrastructure is water. In Eagle, we have developers ready to build. We have land available. We just don't have the water to build. And the Lincoln Water Systems project won't be done until 2040. So when we get to that, then we'll have the water. But until then, we just can't build any more houses due to the lack of water. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? No, thank you. Other testifiers?
Good afternoon, Senators. My name is Helen Alvarez Medina, Hellen Alvarez-Medina. I reside in District 26, and I was an intern for Senator McKinney the last academic year. I'll be presenting on LR 441, examining the impact of local housing regulations on Nebraska's housing supply. I conducted a study where I examined the attributes of the bill that the Senator Armendariz was trying to look at. And to best conduct this study, I spoke to the planning departments of Omaha, Lincoln, Grand Island, Kearney, North Platte, and Scottsbluff. I also included architects, engineers, and developers in my study to gain a deeper understanding of what else could be impacting Nebraska's housing supply. Throughout my study, local zoning regulations, particularly in urban centers, have impeded on the quantity of new housing by making it more difficult to increase density, which also hinders the development of new diverse housing types. While building codes are crucial for safety, they do contribute at times to rising costs, though not to an excessive degree. Additionally, many individuals felt as though the permitting and planning process could be lengthy and complicated, causing delays and impacting project timelines, usually affecting the cost and time for new housing. These sentiments were not shared with rural cities. They virtually had no issues with zoning and density, little to no issues with the permitting and planning process, and felt the same towards building codes, that they at times can make projects a little bit more expensive. Throughout the study, I found that outside of zoning, building codes, and permitting and planning processes, the primary factors impacting housing costs and quantity were the rising prices of building materials, shortage of skilled labor, high interest rates, and surprisingly, energy codes. These factors have significantly affected the affordability and availability of housing. Additionally, community opposition to new developments and restrictive covenants in existing neighborhoods further exacerbated these challenges, impacting both the quantity and types of housing available. To address these issues, I explored what other states have done to address the housing crisis. Other states have created tax increment financing for infrastructure development, streamlined the permitting process, created a housing task force, and they have also increased the ability to raise density by rezoning single-family home areas to allow duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and townhomes. Many states have also allowed accessory dwelling units to mimic condos so that homeowners are able to keep their homes and offer other individuals affordable housing options. By learning and adapting some of these successful models to Nebraska's unique needs, we can ensure that all Nebraskans have access to safe, affordable, and quality housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Thank you. Are there other testifiers? Okay.
Hello, my name is Mark Stursma, MarkStursma, and I'm here. I've worked for the city of Papillion. I was planning director for more years than I care to say, and I'm now the deputy city administrator. I can tell you I was not planning to testify today. I don't have any prepared remarks, but as somebody who works for a city, I thought you may have some questions that you might want to ask based on some of the ideas that were presented. I do think there were a lot of really good ideas that were brought up today. I think the contractor license reciprocity is something that we already strive to do, but probably could do better. I think on the zoning regulations, There's some things that come up a lot in terms of density. A lot of those are market driven or even driven by covenants. Our zoning regulations allow higher density in all the districts. It's rarely taken advantage of. On the building codes, those are thick books, and it's really hard for an individual city to go through and amend those on their own. City of Omaha, I'm sure City of Lincoln does some of that. We usually adopt those same changes that they do, but it is difficult to go through and look at those. I can't tell you that every line, every code in those books is necessary. I also can't tell you which ones are the problem. But that would be something that I can tell you as representative of the city of Papillion, we would be happy to look at. So we're not opposed to that. I came here to learn. I'm definitely going to call Chad Nabity on Monday and get a copy of his small lot zoning classification. These conversations help all of us learn from each other. And I think there's been some good discussion about who is responsible. I think that's one of our real challenges. We don't like top-down regulation. It's difficult for us when the state tells us this is how you have to do it. Sometimes it can be helpful if you help us with a target or a goal. So we're happy to be part of those conversations. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Senator Blood?
Thank you, Chair. Would you say that when the state's consistently handing down unfunded and underfunded mandates to you guys, that it can be challenging for your budget?
Absolutely.
Easy question.
Thank you. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions? No? Thank you. Are there any other testifiers? No? Is there anyone here from Senator Armendariz' staff? No? Is she waiving closing? Huh? Okay. She waived?
Yeah, she is.
All right. Thank you. That'll close our hearing on LR 441.
You're coming back?
No,
Oh, this is yours?
Yeah.
Who's running your? Oh. You. I'm if I remember how, let's see.
Good afternoon, Urban Affairs Committee. My name is Senator Terrell McKinney, Terrell McKinney. I represent District 11 in the legislature. I'm here today to present LR 359, which is an interim study created to review the concept of property development in the state of Nebraska. From this study, we hope to learn about how our property is developed, what is currently working or not working for successful property development, and any possible areas of opportunity for property development. I especially want to emphasize our understanding of how property is developed in areas with high poverty and low social economic outcomes. Through this discussion, I want to learn how to best help in my district and other similar districts across the state. I want to emphasize the importance of this matter and appreciate your attention to it. With that, I am happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I'm sure some people here that are going to testify to the topics of this study. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator McKinney. Are there any questions?
Not by me.
Nor I.
All right, thank you.
Would the first testifier like to approach? Welcome to Urban Affairs. Please spell your name.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman McKinney and members of the Urban Affairs Committee. I'm Eva Roberts, EVA-ROBERTS, Director of Policy and Strategy with Front Porch Investments. Front Porch is dedicated to promoting innovative, equitable housing solutions through the development and preservation of affordable housing in the Omaha metro area. We also advocate for policy changes that encourage affordable housing options across the state. As a nonprofit lender and grant maker, Front Porch invests private and public funds toward housing solutions. And since early 2022 has awarded nearly $40 million in loans and grants to spur the development of housing, both affordable and workforce, in the Omaha Metro. We help housing developers close the funding gaps that are among the greatest challenges to affordable housing development. Affordable housing developers encounter unique financing challenges compared to those developing other types of housing. Market rate and luxury housing builders can recoup their construction costs through the market when consumers with high enough incomes are able to pay full price. So the developers can successfully finance their projects through a combination of equity and bank loans, knowing that income from the end consumer, either buyer or renter, will fully pay for their upfront investment. Affordable housing developers, on the other hand, have to cobble together a stack of funding sources to finance their projects that may include equity, grants, loans, tax credits, to help subsidize the project and fill the gap between the cost of producing a unit of housing and the price that a lower income consumer is able to afford. And so in this way, the housing market is fundamentally broken, and the product itself costs more to produce than the consumer who needs it can afford to pay. So because of this market failure, some subsidy, whether it's a low interest loan from Front Porch, a philanthropic grant, or funding through one of the state's housing funds, is often needed to preserve affordability, and it's often more than one of those. So access to flexible, low-cost financing is only one of the challenges facing affordable housing developers, particularly those that are new and emerging. Today, you will hear about many other challenges, including increasing costs to acquire land and to build, which put many new housing units out of reach, and restrictive zoning that limits the size and types of homes that can be built. And as you've heard, zoning changes that allow for greater density would provide less expensive options and increase and diversify the housing supply. We know that both here in Nebraska and nationally, there's growing consensus that lack of supply is one of the biggest drivers of our affordability crisis. And we would invite this committee and the legislature at large to explore ways to accelerate housing production through our proven housing funding programs. They've been critical to the successful financing of thousands of units across the state. And investments like these contribute to our competitiveness, community well-being, and our ability to enjoy the good life. Thank you.
Good job speeding it up there at the end. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you. Next person come forward. Any testimony? Do we have any others? If you're here to testify, it's really helpful if you can move to the front row. Welcome to Urban Affairs.
Thank you.
Please spell your name.
Bui Ray Tut, Bueyraytut. I'm sorry, I'm gonna use my laptop because I printed out this stuff and turns out I printed out the wrong thing. So sorry about that. I'll state your name and spell it. So that's done. My name is Bui Ray Tut. Like I said, I'm the CEO of Spark. I've been on the job for about a year. Spark is a holistic development organization which focuses on building capacity. Specifically, we work on training developers, small-scale developers, to be able to develop in the community in which they live in. So I'm obviously, forgot to hand this over, but I'm a proponent, obviously. So what is working with, what is working right now, we're looking at Developer Academy and helping get more emerging developers into the game. But we need a lot more developers to be able to develop their communities. Loan forgiveness, loan forgiveness to cover appraisal gaps. It's highly sought after. And one of our developers, his name is Donnell Brown. He's just developed on 24th and Lake, 4 houses right now. He's got on the market. What is being appraised for, what the banks are willing to lend versus what he's able to sell, versus like the cost of the house, that gap, even with the middle workforce income housing forgiveness program, there's still a delta that prevents people from buying those houses. And we think that's a huge problem. So strong interest in, and also strong interest in expanding the middle workforce income housing program, which is a great program that could be expanded. What's not working is lack of flexible financing options beyond middle workforce income housing, limited middle workforce income housing, not able to access NAFT for small scale developers, and other significant issues really quick, construction permitting we just heard over the hour, and complex regulations across funding sources. I'm assuming that means I'm done, right?
No, the red light does.
Oh,
Can you throw
okay.
another 15 seconds in there?
Oh, well, I guess I'll just yield for questions.
Good job.
Thank you.
Any questions? Nor I. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Welcome to next testifier. Build a tree. Welcome to Urban Affairs. Please spell your name.
Good afternoon. My name is Leslie Smith, Lesliesmith. And today I am here before you all to represent the community that we serve, as I am the executive director for the Omaha Municipal Land Bank. The community that we serve, I also hope to provide context and solutions that can be applied statewide as it relates to the redevelopment of vacant properties. The Land Bank was established as a nonprofit with a vision to create pathways for stimulating the local economy by way of addressing systemic vacancy at its core. Since the establishment of the Land Bank, we have served as a tool for the City of Omaha for supporting long-term development, addressing affordable housing needs, and building sustainable communities. As you may be already aware, the crux of what we do in our industry is to facilitate the return of vacant and abandoned properties back into productive use. Why properties become vacant and abandoned in the first place vary, but in most cases, it is either a challenge to the legal or physical conditions associated with the properties. We are charged with the responsibility for tackling these very properties while also finding responsible property owners that have viable plans to return these properties back into community assets. And Frank, when we talk about why properties aren't being developed, we understand the development is real estate investment, which encourages the financial return of those very investments. Over my tenure at the Land Bank, which has been 19 months, we have been closely monitoring and tracking much of the data related to the issues that inhibit and discourage or challenge the development of vacant properties by our buyers and applicants. Some of the observations include barriers associated with site preparation, regulatory barriers, and accessing funding. Included in your packet, there are several supportive aids that provide additional context. And mindful of the time, I'll just fast forward to the actual solutions that I would like to provide for considerations. First, in consideration of pre-development costs being a barrier to development, I would invite you guys to just consider the ideas for advocating for state-level funding to be set aside for Nebraska Municipal Land Bank Acts to provide land banks with resources necessary to prepare properties acquired through the tax sale process, which take over the span of 5 years of neglect and abandonment. The current statute allows for 3 years for tax redemption, but under the Nebraska Constitution, Article 8-3, the state has the power to reduce the tax redemption to 2 years. I would also like to consider innovative state policy solutions that explore strategic code enforcement tools to abate chronic nuisance from further straining municipalities of resources and deteriorating surrounding properties, such as the Neighborhood Preservation Act, which is done in Tennessee, or the Abandoned Housing Act, which also is done in Missouri. I would also like to entertain the idea of creating a one-time tax credit to incentivize owner-occupied new infill construction projects. In closing, I would like to thank you for the invitation to be able to provide additional things. We'd love to have you at our guests at the Reignite to Unite Symposium next year, June 4th through the 5th.
I was going to raise my hand, but I guess I'm the one that would call on it. Do you have any questions? So how does the land bank handle an abandoned property when there's usually so many liens on that property, and there are usually several layers of liens on that property? To different entities? How is that handled with the land bank?
Included in your packet, there's a supportive aid that really kind of shows and demonstrate what that looks like. So when it comes to the liens on those properties that we go through the tax sale process, the legislative act allows the land bank to really abate those liens in order to help unlock the potential in those properties that are in distressed communities.
So what if somebody from like another state, which happens so frequently, has bought one of those liens? Are you allowed to abate those, or do you have to reimburse that person?
So the one fortunate thing, because I'm not from Nebraska, so I got a chance to see how the legislative act for land banks differ. But you guys put a lot of consideration in making sure that we are able to prioritize community assets. So in the Omaha Municipal Land Bank, we've been out in the community and to be able to assess and then figure out what they would like to see, what type of ideal buyer, what type of development they would like to see. And based on our input from the community, we are able to prioritize local and neighbors of those properties in that we are looking to sell. So there's a little chance where, or little instances where we are able to sell properties to out-of-state investors, but also we're not looking to prioritize based on the offer price. We prioritize on the need.
I think we had a miscommunication. I mean, I'm referring to, you can buy liens, and there's a lot of investors that buy liens from out of state and people that have liens against them, it's not, they don't even necessarily know it's been sold to somebody else. So, but I think you've answered what I have.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, that's all right. Senator Lowe? No? Okay,
Thank
you
you.
for your testimony. Any other testifiers?
Good afternoon, members of the Urban Affairs Committee, Senator McKinney. Thank you very much for bringing this to the forefront again. I know that my name is Carol Bodine, CarolBodeen. I'm the Director of Policy and Outreach for the Nebraska Housing Developers Association. We are a membership organization of over 70 members across the state committed to the development and availability of safe, affordable housing for all Nebraskans. And I won't read word for word. I've provided a copy of the testimony, but I did want to say that we really do appreciate the continued conversation about affordable housing. I know that you've heard a lot about this over the years, and that I know you continue to hear me come up and talk about it. One of the barriers that rises to the top in the discussions among our members is cost. And so that's the part that I'm going to talk about. The cost to acquire and prepare land for development, along with the prices of supplies and labor. These costs make it difficult to impossible to build units that can be priced in ways that make them affordable for renters and buyers who are low to moderate income wage earners. So in my estimation, that is what is not working. It's too expensive. What is working is the existence of our state's housing programs. The Nebraska Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the workforce housing programs, the state's low-income housing tax credit programs. Our members utilize all of these programs. We feel, especially so, that the Nebraska Affordable Housing Trust Fund is a valuable tool which has been utilized to develop and preserve affordable housing across Nebraska since 1996. And it has been paired with the low-income housing tax credit programs and the home program through HUD. In recent years, the addition of workforce housing programs has added another source of funding to meet the varied needs of our communities. I know that one of the things we would wish is that that could be used as well with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I provided reports that have been prepared from the Legislative Research Office. Those are current reports this year. And so I just want to make sure that you guys have those at your convenience to review. I know I'm getting close to my time, so I'm going to try to wrap up. One of the things that we feel is that as a state, we need to increase our investment to incentivize affordable housing. We need increased funds to the Nebraska Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We need DED to be able to use all of the funds that are coming into it. We also need additional allocations for the Rural Workforce Housing Fund and the Middle Income Workforce Housing Fund, and not a shift from one source to another as what happened in the 2024 legislative session. We thank you all for your attention and for your interest in continuing to tackle this crucial issue.
Any questions? I have one question. Why do you think that shift happened in the 2024 session?
I think that it was the fact that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is cash fund. And so it has funds that are basically sitting in the fund. And so it's not that they are not or couldn't be used, but it is a result of the fact that when the funds are granted, they are, they're not coming out of the fund at that point. It's on a reimbursement basis. So there's always money in that fund, but it's being used, and then the grantees are requesting it, and then money is coming into it from the doc stamp. So it appears that it has a balance that at times is not being used.
But that's not accurate.
But that's not completely accurate.
So
And I think
you're part of the piggy bank of how they
Yes.
tried to balance the budget.
exactly, there was
without
a
really
shift.
caring about what the money is actually used for.
There was a shift from many cash funds last year, and we were one of those victims.
I just wanted that on the record. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your testimony. We're done. Any other testifiers? Welcome to Urban Affairs. Please spell your name.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman McKinney and members of the committee. My name is Charlon Rogers, spelled SHARLON RODGERS. And I serve as the president and CEO of 75 North, a community development organization dedicated to the revitalization of North Omaha's Highlander neighborhood. I'm here today to express 75 North's strong support for Legislative Resolution 359, which seeks to study and improve the process of property development in Nebraska. As a community organization deeply engaged in affordable housing projects, we at 75 North frequently encounter obstacles that slow down or even prevent the creation of much-needed housing. The study proposed by LR 359 would provide valuable insights into these challenges and help identify solutions that can enhance access to affordable homes, not just in mixed-income communities like Highlander, but across Nebraska. One of the major challenges we face as an affordable housing developer is the limited funding available specifically for land acquisition. While land is often accessible, the financial resources to acquire it are scarce. Even when we secure funding to purchase land, we then face the high costs associated with preparing that land for housing, such as infrastructure development, costs that often make affordable housing projects financially unfeasible. Additionally, once we acquire land, we must navigate a variety of funding sources to build the homes themselves. Each phase of development, fund acquisition, infrastructure, and construction often comes with its own set of requirements, particularly around income restrictions for qualifying buyers, which vary widely across programs. These conflicting guidelines create significant barriers as they limit who can qualify for affordable home ownership. As a result, families who these programs are intended to serve are often excluded due to these conflicting regulations, which complicate the development process and reduce access to affordable home ownership for all Nebraskans. Nebraska currently ranks among the lowest states in terms of spending on housing and community development. According to the 2021 survey, our state government spent about $941,000 on these projects, significantly less than neighboring states like Iowa and Kansas. This lack of investment makes it even more difficult for developers to secure the necessary funding to move affordable housing projects forward. By studying Nebraska's property development process, LR 359 presents a critical opportunity to provide a clear understanding of the landscape of available funding sources to affordable housing developers and offer recommendations for improving them. whether through targeted funding, tax incentives, or regulatory reforms that prioritize affordable housing. Seeing that my time is short, I will just conclude with this in saying, I urge you to support this resolution as it will provide insights needed to reduce development barriers and ensure that more Nebraskans can benefit from affordable housing. Thank you for your time and consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? No, seeing no questions, thank you for your testimony. The next person, please come forward that's here to testify.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Urban Affairs. Will you please spell your name?
Pardon me?
Please spell your name.
Okay, it's Joe Higgins, Joehiggins. I am a proponent and I represent myself. I don't have a long list of credentials, but Terrell sees me a little too frequently, I think. Well, I'm the president of Levi Carter Sherman neighborhood, so I've been to a lot of Inland Port and other meetings of late. I'm here to support the people that preceded me. And in particular, I was recently introduced to the co-developer program, which is new at Spark. And this fits in well. Although I'm seasoned, I just completed classes at Metro Community College for construction management. And being at the point in my life where I am, I want to give back to my community. And I feel that one of our most needed things in Nebraska and Omaha is affordable housing. And I want to be part of that. So as a community, I support the community doing projects. And I think that the development and all the people that preceded me contribute to that. And as a community member, I want to be part of the process, part of the solution. And so I support this bill and the study of what's going to happen. So in conclusion, I would be considered an emerging developer, and I'm going to be able to tie in my education at Metro with an internship, hopefully selected as a co-developer, and grow into being able to do projects. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any
Was that short
questions?
enough this time?
That was nice and short. Seeing no questions, thank you for your testimony. Are there any other people that would like to come forward? Welcome back. As you know, please spell your name.
Thank you. My name is Fred Hoppe, Fredhoppe. I'm a builder and developer in Cross, Nebraska. Our issues are in the development phases. Cost of land usually is a problem in metro areas, not so much a problem rural. Number two, the A&D loans. A&D means acquisition and development loans. To go get them, you only get them at 75% of what it really costs you to put it all together. So somehow you got to fill that other 25%. If you do a lot of it, it eats all your capital. So we turn to places like Spark or Front Porch to try and bridge that gap. Or we go to programs from the state. And the significance of using those programs cannot be overestimated. It's just, we couldn't be working in our niche, which is median income, rural workforce, and middle income, and capital A affordable, without assistance, programmatic assistance across the board. So I'd answer any questions. That's simple. The cost of putting all these things together is more than you can amortize out of the ultimate buyers or renters of your projects. So somewhere you got to fill those gaps. Any questions?
Let's see. Any questions? No? And none for me. Thank you so much for your
You bet.
testimony. Is there anybody else that would like to come forward and testify on LR 359? Seeing none, Senator McKinney, would you like to come forward and close?
Well, I guess I'll just say thank you to everyone that came down to testify and, give their, commentary on LR 359. I think it's important. I think learning how property is developed and how we can improve property development across the state is very important if we're ever going to tackle our housing crisis. So I really appreciate it. So that's my close.
Any questions? No? Seeing none, we'll now close the hearing on LR 359. You have the next one too, Senator?
Huh?
You have the next one too?
I got the rest.
We'll open the hearing now for LR 360. Senator McKinney, you are welcome to open.
Thank you and good afternoon again, Urban Affairs Committee. My name is Terrell McKinney, TERRELL MCKINNEY. I represent District 11. I'm here today to present LR 360, which is an interim study created to review the Middle Income Workforce Investment Act. Today, I'd like to hear more about how this act is functioning, who is receiving the grant funds under the act, and any possible changes to the act that may be needed to be addressed. It is vital to include both perspectives to ensure a balanced conversation. After two representatives, well, not even that, I just open it up to all testimony. If anybody wants to come up, just come up and testify and give your perspective on, how it's functioning, who's receiving it, and, what possible changes are needed to improve the program and what are some things we're missing down here in the legislature that's just being looked over. So with that, I'll open myself up to any questions you guys might have.
Any questions? No?
Thank you.
So seeing that, we now welcome testimony to LR 360. If anybody would like to come and testify. Welcome back. Thank you. Please spell your name.
Eva Roberts, EVA-ROBERTS with Front Porch Investments. As we've heard earlier, there is a statewide shortage of up to 120,000 housing units, which include inadequate low to middle income workforce housing options. The Middle Income Workforce Housing Fund was established in 2020 to support development of owner-occupied workforce housing in our larger cities. It's one of several funding vehicles in the housing affordability ecosystem, which together support communities of all sizes, a variety of housing types and income levels. Last session, many in this room and outside of the room worked with Senator McKinney to advance a number of changes to further improve this program. LB 843 increased the grant minimum from $5 million to $10 million and reduced local match from 50% to 25%. These policy changes mirrored similar changes which were made to the Rural Workforce Housing Fund in the prior session and were intended to make it easier for these state funds to achieve their stated purpose, development of affordable housing for Nebraska's workers. This same bill also expanded eligibility for the program beyond certain Omaha and Lincoln qualified census tracts to include urban communities in Lancaster and Sarpy counties. So given this expanded geography, we respectfully suggest that the committee explore whether the fund balance should be increased to accommodate all projects that are now eligible. Other areas for future consideration include allowing other eligible use types besides single-family homes. Alternative missing middle housing types such as duplexes and townhomes are often less expensive to build and therefore more affordable to purchase and can be constructed within existing neighborhoods, making them attractive to consumers looking for density and more walkable neighborhoods. Finally, the committee might explore eliminating prohibitions against stacking middle income funds with other public funding streams. Since affordable housing projects frequently require multiple funding streams in their capital stack to break even, the current prohibition against stacking makes financing affordable projects that much harder. In fact, many Front Porch Investments borrowers also receive loans through the Middle Income Workforce Housing Fund. That's one thing that is not prohibited. Front Porch looks forward to continuing to partner with the state to leverage both public resources and private and philanthropic dollars to address Nebraska's affordable housing needs. We thank you for your continued interest in improving this important program and your support for the changes that were made in the regular session. And we look forward to seeing the results of those bear fruit in the coming funding cycles. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to come forward and testify in LR 360? Welcome back.
Thank you. Mr. Blood, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Corby Gilbertson, KORBY-GILBERTSON. I'm here today on behalf of Habitat for Humanity of Omaha. And it's in order not to be repetitive, and because I know you all have other things to do, I do want to reiterate, LB 843 was great. Increasing the funds to $10 million really did make a big difference in the ability for Habitat to be able to use the funds to do different projects. I want to give you an example. In the most recent award, they were able to extend a construction loan for the construction of 23 additional houses the same day they received the grant. And then the organization was also able to make a mortgage loan to a buyer within a week of the award deposit. It's also, in Habitat's opinion, exclusively used for home ownership. Other funding sources include rentals too. Habitat feels strongly that with the need of housing in these qualified census tract areas, home ownership is needed the most, and that's a smart thing to keep these funds limited to that. The middle income housing dollars also are operated in a way that they cut down on administrative demands for staff. If you look at other Department of Economic Development and administered grants, there is a lot of oversight and duplicity that you have to do. Same paperwork or additional paperwork for the same type of grants, and with the middle income money, it's operated much better. One of the concerns is that the money is slow to be spent. We hear that all the time with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and that's why those funds get swept. And I've been watching that for as long as it's been around. And the argument is, well, there's still money sitting there, so you're not spending it. Well, that doesn't mean that it isn't being used. And so I think that's one thing that we have to keep watching as a state to make sure we protect those funds and protect these funds. The good thing about this is this money is able to go out a little faster. Habitat has been able to use it within 12 to 24 months. So far, Habitat has completed 36 homes with the original funds that they received. And then with the revolving funds, they have funded an additional 12 homes. And so a total of 30 homes are planned to be completed this year with those revolving funds. So those are the benefits of this program. And I think from when we started this with Senator Williams years ago, and he started looking at all of the different things that we could do, we have proven that the different housing funds have really had good results. And Habitat's one of the good users of those funds and has really done some amazing projects. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a quick question. You may not know the answer. Do you know what the average cost of a Habitat house is?
I don't, but I will get that for you.
I would like that, because it seems, I watch them very carefully in Sarpy, and they seem to be very cost efficient. And I'd be curious as to why. And I do know that some of it's, they get things waived, and I know we've had property that's been abandoned that the city council will just like give to them, but I would be curious to see.
Right, and it might vary based on the different development areas because they have different projects going on in different areas.
Absolutely.
But I'll get you some.
I'm just curious.
I'll get you some data. Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. You want it? Okay, I can do that.
Thank you for your testimony.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome back. Please spell your name.
Fred Hoppe, F-R-E-D, H-O-P-P-E. These hearings are all on my sweet spot. So that's why I'm here and testifying again. We build rural workforce, and I've worked with middle income. I'm a board member of Nebraska Housing Resource, which is a grantee of middle income funds. And I will tell you first off that Middle Income Act is perfect for habitat. It's just the right kind of a resource for assistance to habitat buyers. But when it comes to for sale product that is outside the habitat model, it's very difficult to get buyers qualified and buying through that product. Why? Because the middle income, median income Lancaster County, for instance, can only afford at a 7% mortgage, and it's not far off for a 6% mortgage, can only afford a house that's about $260,000. Okay, to put a house on a lot, new construction right now, cost every bit of that. And so it's just a difficult product. When Eva talked about stacking, if we will be able to stack other programs with it, we could buy that down. Secondarily, for us in rural areas, we frequently build a rental model. So we're getting people in the housing, but it's in the rental product, and in rural workforce housing, rental is allowed. It is not in urban. It is not in middle income. And notwithstanding Corby's comments, we would advocate for allowing middle income to the rental product. We'd be using it. And we participate with Habitat a lot. We're doing it in Lincoln, we're doing it in Omaha. So, but a rental product in middle income would be well used, I can tell you, at least by our firm. Any questions?
Any questions? Yes, Senator.
Thank you. It's not a question. I just have a statement that it's nice we're talking about Habitat for Humanity during the week of Jimmy Carter's 100th birthday.
That's very true. And he was a real advocate. Yeah.
See no other questions. Thank you so much for your
You
testimony.
bet.
Anybody else like to speak on LR 360? Again, I encourage you, if you're testifying, to come to the front row so we can make it move a little bit faster. Welcome back. Please spell your name.
Thank you. Bui Ray Tut, BUEYRAYTUT. I'm with Spark. Thank you, senators, and thank you, Senator McKinney, for bringing this up. As I said earlier, Omaha or Spark represents small-scale entrepreneurial developers in building up their capacity and being able to develop in the community in which they live in and they represent. One of the things we're seeing with the middle workforce income housing as it pertains to our developers, unlike larger developers, our developers don't have the resources to be able to, to be able to utilize all aspects of the capital stack. So there are small scale developers, like take myself, for example. My wife and I have saved 15 to 20K over the years that we're using our safety net. And if I wanted to use that money to do development, first of all, I don't have the scale to do a large part. So, and especially in the North Omaha area, I could do parcels at a time. The middle workforce income housing isn't allowing me to do multifamily. So if I want to build a fourplex, that's going to be very difficult. And I want to live in one with my small family and rent the other three. It's not possible. So it's not just from the supply side issue of bringing houses onto the market, but how do you build wealth of small scale emerging entrepreneurial developers if they cannot rent, if they're not able to rent the rest of the housing. So I think it empowers individuals that are living in the community in which they represent, small scale developers that don't have the resources to really do things at scale. It empowers them to build wealth, to build their opportunity and actually move up on ladders. So I'm a huge proponent of this. I had a long list of things to talk about, but I just wanted to bring that out. In conclusion, I think we need, as Eva said, as everybody else said, we need to expand the middle workforce income housing. I think that's very important, but actually make it more applicable for small scale and emerging developers. We need the legislation to allow more flexible, capable stacking. We need the legislation to clarify that home buyer subsidies should not be prohibited for middle workforce income housing. And if we care about community ownership, entrepreneurs, and local developers, we need to make these changes a priority.
Very good. Any questions? No? See no questions. Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next testifier on LR 360. Please spell your name. You're welcome.
Joe Higgins, Joehiggins. I'm a resident of Omaha. I just don't want to repeat what everybody said, but from my perspective as a community advocate and someone living in the community we're talking about, I feel that changes that help open up the credit lines and availability, in particular, one of them would be the Rural Workforce Housing Fund that allows rentals. However, the fund we're discussing doesn't. And I feel that's a particularly interesting point, because as a community member, I can only build so many and I can't afford to build affordable single family. So by being able to build, say, a fourplex with the same kind of loan products, I'm able to help maybe myself as well as 3 to 4 other people and keep it affordable. And I think that's something important. So just to reiterate, I support the infill development, which is our most cost effective, and I think it affects the community, and having community residents and advocates be part of the solution makes that more community based and more of a place. It still maintains its feel as a neighborhood. Although I support the larger developments, I think we need that infill product to support our communities.
Thank you. Any questions? No?
Also, I was remiss. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify, and thank you for your service.
Do we have any other testifiers on LR 360? Seeing none, Senator McKinney, would you like to come forward?
Again, thank you to everyone that came to testify. I appreciate your suggestions and your feedback on the LR and also on the Middle Income Workforce Housing Fund. I do think the Rural Income Workforce Housing Fund and the Middle Income Workforce Housing Fund, if one is doing something, the other should be able to do that as well. So I do think that's something we should look at as a body to make sure that, across the board, if housing is a crisis, we need to be trying to solve it equally and fairly across the state. So I'll definitely take that suggestion to look at, how do we allow rentals to happen within the fund. My only thing I'm thinking about, and I'm probably overthinking it, I've been overthinking a lot this week, but, allowing rentals, because my district is already heavily rented. Like we already have a huge renter base, and that's a concern, but also protecting all the communities, not even just my district, from outside developers coming in and somehow accessing the fund and starting renting properties to take advantage of it, because we have an issue with a lot of companies coming in, buying up property and renting them out for ungodly amounts. So that's just my concern of just the percentage of renters in my district already and outside developers taking advantage of the things we have in the state. So I'm not against it. It's just thinking about the protections that we need to put in place, because I think it's important, because a part of why our housing crisis is the way it is also due to outside investments and, Wall Street firms and things like that buying up property now and selling them, and it's just an issue across the country, actually. So that's something I'm thinking about. But thank you.
Any questions? I actually have a question.
Yes.
So I agree with you. I see a caveat in the rental part. And one of the concerns that I have, especially when we're talking about areas where we are looking for middle income and below housing, isn't part of the point of creating home ownership, giving people the opportunity for home ownership, also supposed to be a way that we start rebuilding the generational wealth that is missing.
Right.
And that's one of my concerns, especially when we look at areas like North Omaha, is that we have a whole generation or two of people that are missing out on generational wealth because they are not homeowners, and for a long list of other reasons. But we know that's equity. We know that if you have paid into a house for 20 years and somebody gets sick, that you have the benefit of remortgaging that house to pay off your medical bills. I mean, there's nothing else in our lives, except for other family members maybe, outside of home ownership that creates that type of protection. And so I do worry that the funds for rental don't accomplish those things. And maybe the point is they're not supposed to, but for me, I'm always, how do we lift people up in a way that's sustainable, in a way that affects the generations that come behind them? And so that is my concern as well with the rental part of it.
I agree. And I would probably have to dig deeper into how it's working in rural communities with allowing for the rentership. So I would probably have Elsa look into that, how it's working and who's taking advantage of those opportunities. Because, hopefully local people are able to take advantage of those opportunities. And so that's what I would like to see. Like, if it's working in rural, who are the people actually taking advantage of it? Is it local developers and local entities, or is it out of state developers?
Well, and again, what is the actual result? Because to be really frank, rural America is experiencing the same thing as areas like North America when it comes to generational wealth. And we keep missing out on opportunities to help fix that. We throw a lot of money towards the people that are on the perimeter, but the people that are actually involved in the problem, we tend to ignore.
And I mean, you could build generational wealth through renting out homes and things like that.
It's true.
But
you have to have the money to get the house.
Exactly. Another thing I'm thinking about is, like, if people are allowed to do, rent properties through the fund, is it centralized within a couple developers, or is it spread out amongst the community where the community is taking advantage of the program? Or is it 1, 2, or 3 developers taking advantage of it?
And why can't it be rent to own?
True. That too.
We used to see that quite a bit in Sarpy County. Those days are gone. So,
Yeah.
right. Any other questions? No?
No.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Senator McKinney. With that, we're going to close the hearing on LR 360. We're going to open up on another hearing here. So if you're exiting, please, we ask that you do it quietly. And if you're testifying, please come to the front. With that, we're going to open up the hearing for LR 438. And again, welcome to Urban Affairs, Senator McKinney.
Okay. Good afternoon again, Urban Affairs Committee. My name is Terrell McKinney, TERRELL MCKINNEY, and I represent District 11. I'm here to present LR 438, which is a study to review the credentialing requirement for fire alarm inspectors for purposes of the Occupational Board Reform Act, otherwise known as OBRA. In 2018, the legislature passed OBRA, which became operative July 21, 2019. OBRA's primary objective was to establish a well-organized system for the continuous assessment and examination of occupational regulations in Nebraska. The responsibility was assigned to 14 standing committees of the legislature. Under OBRA, an occupational regulation is defined as a statute, rule, regulation, practice, policy, or the state law requiring an individual to possess certain personal qualifications or to qualify with registration requirements to use an occupational title or work in a lawful occupation. As started in 2019 and continuing today, each standing committee is required to conduct an annual review and evaluation of approximately 20% of the occupational regulations that fall within their respective areas of jurisdiction. Following this assessment, the committees are then to prepare and submit an annual report to the clerk of the legislature by December 15th. The report should include the committee's recommendations regarding whether the occupational regulation should be terminated, continued, or modified. There are 4 occupational regulations that fall under the jurisdiction of the Urban Affairs Committee. This year, our focus is on the regulations pertaining to fire alarm inspectors. I think that's it. I introduced LR 438 to facilitate the review of the occupational regulations for fire alarm inspectors. There's a comprehensive report provided in the committee materials for your consideration. Following my presentation, a representative from the Fire Marshal's office will provide further insights into the report specific. And thank you for your attention and answer any questions.
Seeing no questions, we'll open the hearing for testifiers on LR 438. Would you like to come and testify?
They left.
They left?
Yeah, I have their information in office.
Oh, they shared?
Yeah.
All right, so with that, would you like to close this hearing?
They have some.
Well, if I could take a vacation hour, I don't know, we can need someone to speak. But
Do you?
How long is it?
Can't you just put this in the record?
I would just say that I just wrote it, but
Oh,
yeah, you can skip. Go
yeah,
ahead.
we can. Well, it's all right.
Talk about it later.
Well,
We'll listen to the podcast.
in my close, I would, ask members of the committee to review the report that was provided. I'm not sure where the fire marshal went, but he's not here, so we'll close there. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, we will now close the hearing for LR 438. With that, is that our last one?
No, 437, and I think they also left too.
No.
Oh, okay, awesome.
IBW Sir John's here.
Okay, well,
I haven't opened it yet.
I'm back. Oh, yes, right.
Being so boss. All right, we're now going to open the hearing for LR 437. Senator McKinney, if you'd like to open.
All right, I'm back again, Urban Affairs Committee. My name is Terrell McKinney, TerrellMcKinney, and I represent District 11. I'm here today to present LR 437, which on paper is an interim study created to examine issues within the jurisdiction of the Urban Affairs Committee. Today, we're using the interim study in order to examine the current need to update the Nebraska building and electrical codes. In both 2023 and 2024, the Urban Affairs Committee received bills that would update the International Building Code, International Residential Code, and International Energy Conservation Code from 2018 editions to 2021 editions. Both times these bills were heard in front of the committee. The original version, LB 164 in 2023 and LB 1219 in 2024. We received opposing testimony from cities and home builders citing difficulties with rising costs. Today, I welcome testimony to further delve into this topic. It is crucial that we understand why we need to update our codes and to also understand the barriers to updating the codes. I believe that today's discussion will provide insight towards addressing this issue. Overall, I want to emphasize the importance of this matter and appreciate your attention to it. With that, I'm happy to address any questions. I just thought it was important, since 2 years in a row, this was introduced and we didn't get anywhere on it. And I know it's important. We're in 2024 and we're basically 6 years behind. And I think we need to figure out some way to get past this impasse, to figure out how can we update the codes? What are the real barriers to this? And that's why I wanted to introduce this and have a discussion about it. So thank you.
Any questions? All right, Senator
And
Levin?
I just need some exercise. I'm just,
Oh.
no. You know, we've talked about this before, and in one hand, we say that we can't afford housing. And in the other hand, we say we need to update the codes, which, as we've seen, increase the cost of building. How do we create affordable housing if we keep on increasing the codes? And if we just don't look at what makes the house better? Is the house any more safe than it was before?
I think when I think about it, I think now that we're 6 years behind, I think maybe there might be an increase in cost because we've delayed the implementation. I think there's a cost at not updating as well, because eventually there's going to have to be an update because our electrical trades are going to fall out of compliance some type of way, and we're going to have to update. And it's just whether or not we're going to just update them now or later and brunt the cost later. I think also when we think about the rising housing costs, I don't think it's just the codes that's the problem. It's a lot of factors in the complex mix of. And I think the other issue, which we probably need to get to as well, is to get everybody that has a stake in the game of like our housing needs to get to the table and have that conversation of the codes, the permits, the developers, the material people, the construction people, and figure out, okay, because everybody's pointing fingers. It's not us, it's this. It's not us, it's this. It's a problem that needs to be solved, but because we're not solving it, we're falling more and more out of compliance, and now we're 6 years behind. I understand that changes have been made, but there's also an argument those changes were made for safety reasons, and thinking 20 years ahead from now, what if some of the things that have been updated could be life-saving, or could, like, not even just for families inside the homes, but for our first responders as well, to protect them. And we got to think about all factors and not just costs. Because sometimes we just got to say, the cost is the cost. We rather protect ourselves and protect the people that's supposed to protect us. And we just have to brunt the cost. So I'm not sure if I have the answers. That's why. But I think it's a lot of things to think about, for sure.
I appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you.
Senator, wouldn't you say, you and I both are very aware of what the history of labor is, and that a lot of the codes that have come along, unfortunately, because people have been hurt and killed, and that in the century that we live in, allegedly, we value human life more, and so, we stopped child labor, and we went to more normal work weeks, which of course we're getting away from again, unfortunately. I'm not trying to trick you to saying yes, but I think that we feel the same in that when it comes to workplace protections, when it comes to a safe workplace, when it comes to the people that we value that go to work every day, isn't that ultimately what the codes are about? Is protecting the workers and protecting the people who somehow could be hurt in the future. And if we don't keep them up, then we're just waiting for another tragedy, and that's when we'll fix it. Because that tends to be how the codes have always come along. Somebody gets hurt, something goes wrong, somebody sees an error, and then we change the code.
Yeah, I believe so. I think without codes, just in general, in life, without laws, without any type of guardrails, there's a lot of risk. So, but I also think times change, and we also have to factor that in, that times change and things are updated every day. The world from 2018 to 2024 is a different world.
Change is the norm now, right?
You know, we all survived a pandemic. Luckily, you know, we've been through a couple presidents, about to have a third. You know, I served with y'all and now y'all leaving. So, you know, the world is changing. So I think we always have to be adaptive to the world and innovative. And I think what mind boggles me, just honestly speaking, is I just feel like we've in some type, in many ways, money and just not coming to a space where we could just meet in the middle has complicated a lot of things in society. And I think this is one. I think this is a conversation where if level heads just got to the table and was like, okay, like, is it really the cost? Is it really the regulations? Let's sit down for a day and figure this out. I think you could, but it's so many outside factors that are influencing this conversation.
Right.
So I don't know. Because I go into YouTube dark holes about, you know, how houses were constructed in the past and how we were just building and building and building. And we had codes back then, and I'm sure in those decades the codes were changing, and they didn't. So it's just, I don't know. I just think
But at the same time, I mean, I look at, there's certain parts of Old Town Bellevue that if anybody puts a match in one of those buildings, that whole block is going up. So for instance, we go back to how things used to be. There are literally walls in some of those buildings. I know because I've seen it, that the insulation is like chicken wire and newspapers. Like, I think we have to be careful how far back we go and what we're willing to accept.
For sure.
Because clearly that's a fire issue. And I hate to even go in those buildings knowing what I know.
Because, I mean, there's some buildings that use old, wood shavings for insulation. So it's a lot, but,
not to mention asbestos. And, yeah, the list is long in those old buildings. So, yeah, that's my fear, is that.
I think my overall concern is that the more we continue to put this off, we might potentially make our housing crisis worse when our electricians can't do the work anymore. That's what I'm thinking about as well. Like, it potentially by not taking on the new codes, we could potentially make the crisis worse.
I want them to be able to come home safely to their families.
That too, yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll invite any testifiers up that would like to speak on LR 437. Welcome back. Please spell your name.
My name is John Nebel, Jonnebel. I'm president of State Council of Electrical Workers in Nebraska, and I think you all know where I stand on the safety side of the codes. And I was hoping that this hearing today would provide some more insight as to what the more vanity side of the codes were going to be that we'd have issue with. I read the transcripts from the last two bills introduced on this, and I think I got a gist of what to expect as we move forward and develop this next iteration of adopting these codes. There's concerns over putting electric chargers in a garage, or maybe the house has got too efficient to where it become a vacuum and we had to put another piece of equipment in to make the house make sure it can breathe or whatnot. And I, for one, know that I like to sit next to the perimeter of my house and not be cold. So I appreciate that a house can be more efficient. And I think back to the 2000s when there were some terrorism concerns and whether there was going to be some type of chemical gas or something. And the president actually came out and said, get a roll of duct tape and just start duct taping the windows around your house and you're going to be okay. That's not the world I want to live in. I want to live in a world where if we know we can build an efficient house that is sealed like an envelope and we just have one piece of equipment that can filter everything in and out, I prefer to live in that type of house, that type of community. So when we develop this code, I think that's something that we need to consider is not just is it for immediate life safety, or is it good for the good and welfare of the community? The electric vehicle chargers, for example, that's something that's coming. We have two choices to make. We can bury our head in the sand and think that there's not battery factories being made all over this country. There's not every car manufacturer transitioning to electric vehicle. We didn't just pass a tax package that said we're going to capture some of the electric vehicle stuff to make sure our roads are still maintained. I think we've acknowledged that electric vehicles are coming, and we should treat it like we do appliances in houses. Nobody says you have to buy a dishwasher, a stove, or a microwave when you buy a house, but you're pretty happy when you find out that all the roughing has been there for it and you don't have to go and upgrade your electrical service and upgrade your wiring to make sure that the equipment that you just bought can just be plugged in. So we should treat that type of code the same way. Do we want to set people up for success and make it affordable to live there in the future? Or once they transition in 10 years and everybody has an electric car and they find out, oh, it's going to cost me another $10,000 to put in this outlet that would have been a minimal cost on a rough end. That's the type of things that I hope we consider when we draft this next adoption of what I think is going to be the 2024 International Building Code and the efficiency codes. And I'm more than willing to have conversations up until the date of introduction and as we move forward to make sure we can hit the ground running with it, because there's no reason to not itemize all these out and find out why it is we have these codes. And it's not just a cost-effective thing, but more of a, is this the type of quality product that we want to put out for every Nebraskan from here on board if we know we can do it?
Any questions? All right.
Thank you. And John, again, thanks for staying late tonight.
You bet.
This afternoon and coming to testify. In the 2023 building code, if you build an island in your kitchen, you have to put a pop-up plug-in in. How does that make the house safer?
Initially, I would say you wouldn't be dragging an extension cord from a nether countertop across to where maybe it would fall in contact with water and stuff like that.
Why can't you put a plug-in on the side of your island?
Oh, well, because people were using them those ways and they would plug in like their crock pot and stuff, and people would come by during parties or whatever and the crock pot would spill and damage and hurt people. So they kind of went away from the outside ones where it's a high traffic area and put it in the pop-up so you can, it's a safer install, I suppose.
So you spill your pot.
Spill your pot, hot pot. Yep.
Hot pot.
Yep.
Okay.
So I'm going to build on that question. So if a child were to walk by and pull the wire, which happens frequently on things like irons, it could potentially kill the child, if not maim them for life.
Yes, for sure, for sure. And the iron doesn't know what it's touching. If it, say it happens and doesn't hit the child and nobody knows about it, it just happened and as somebody was passing and the iron's just sitting there burning.
I mean,
So,
when I think of outlets on the side, the first thing I think about is little kids. And we've heard story after story after story of things like that happening.
So building on that, shouldn't we put retractable cords inside the device so the cord can't hang over the side where the kid could also touch it?
It's still
I would be nervous that if it's the cord is retractable, that it doesn't have a disconnect means that someone could get hung up into it, kind of like similar thing with like the blinds, hanging kids like that. But good concept, yes. I find ways to.
Sounds like an expensive plug-in.
Could be.
All right, do you have any other questions?
Nope.
All right. I see no other questions, so thank you so much for coming.
Just one thing on that, since you brought it up on the expensive side of it. The study that was mentioned earlier about the cost of these building codes going into place is like 23%. I actually looked at that study and that was a generalization of all code enforcement and everything, but the codes themselves is actually about 9.9% of the overall housing costs, which is pretty close to the actual 9.6%, which is the same study says is what the profit margin is for these houses. So it's not really as much as they say it is, but I'd be happy to share that study because I think it was a little bit misconception of what was happening there.
So the code's 9% of the cost of the housing?
Yep, to keep up with the standards is about 9% of the cost.
Okay. So a $100,000 house, that's $9,000, a $400,000 house, 36,000.
Yep. And that's again to have things like the rough-ins for the appliances is the type of codes we're talking about.
Do you think it's a good idea to put the electrical car plug-ins in a house in Gordon, Nebraska, where they're probably never going to get a electrical pickup or electrical car? There might be a few up there, but not every house is going to get them, or on the ranches or places like that.
You don't think in the next 2 decades that we're going to be at a point where it's all electric?
I'm going to guess the plugins change in that period of time, and we'll have to update the plugins and the cords and everything else.
I think it's the part of it that I see happening is that it's a heavy power supply, and it's the equivalent of putting in like an electric heater in your garage. So you could use the plug for that in the meantime. But the problem that we're going to see if we don't have that standard of rough-in there, that when the house is built, there's that downward pressure again on you got to get the lowest bid and you got to cut all the corners you can. If I don't have to put in the power supply for that type of demand, I'm not going to put it in, I'm not going to build it into the service. And then you're going to find out that your electrical service is too small. And so we're to a point where if you don't do it now, if you don't have that standard, if I didn't have a standard of putting in a stove or a dryer, my electrical service would be smaller. But then if I wanted it later, I'd have to not only put in the plug, but I have to upgrade the electrical service. So I think it's like a compounding factor of if we don't just do the simple rough in now that you can use for whatever, the power doesn't really care, it's just the size of the power, that we're going to end up into a situation where you're going to pay triple, double for coming up to speed once we do get electric vehicles across the country.
Okay. So you represent the Union of Electrical Workers in Nebraska. How many of the utility trucks are electric for the electrical workers?
Oh, I'm not sure on that.
1%?
I don't know. I don't know that they've changed over their fleet to be electric yet. I know buses are, that's a thing that's coming. And other than that, I'm not sure that there's been a mandate to start capturing bigger equipment like that.
Thank you.
All right. Are we sure there's no other questions? Right.
I want to go home.
All right. Thank you for your testimony.
You betcha.
He faked us out before and said he had no other, so.
Sorry about that.
All right. Do we have any other testifiers? No? If you'd like to come forward and, he waves closing. With that, we close the hearing on LR 437 and close the Urban Affairs Committee meeting. Forgot where I was for a minute.